I've heard of the dead, that there was green round their mouths because they were living on what they could gather in the ditches, dandelion, fern.
Oh, tragic. Oh, yes. Oh, yes, the famine destroyed Ireland. It destroyed the Irish.
Of a great crisis in our Ulster province, and the marching feet of the Protestants today caused the Twitter to tremble.
It wasn't a bomb, but it was an ambush, because when the troops arrived, fire was opened up just down the road.
And if Britain lets one man or woman die in those prisons, she may well fan the same spark that burns today and has burned ever since in this country into one more flame of resistance that will free 32 counties and build a country we can all live in.
Has been duly elected to serve as a member for the said constituency.
Someone who is serving a sentence for crime. Crime is crime is crime. It is not political, it is crime.
Loughgall would become a tombstone for British policy in Ireland.
they used a mechanical digger with the bomb placed in the front scoop, driven straight through the station's perimeter fence.
They were highly regarded in terms of their proficiency and their capacity and confidence and difficulty to penetrate. They were a sophisticated unit which presented problems and had done for some time.
For centuries, Irish men and Irish women have paid a very high price because of the British occupation of our country. During the 1980s, the East Tyrone Brigade provided the cutting edge throughout the 6 counties and beyond. The strategy adopted saw barracks after barracks attacked and destroyed. On May the 8th, 1987, another such operation was launched in Loughgall, County Armagh. On that night, 8 volunteers of Loughgall and a passing civilian, Anthony Hughes, lost their lives. This is the story of ordinary young men who became extraordinary because of the times and circumstances in which they lived. We remember with pride volunteers Declan Arthurs, Tony Gormley, Patrick Kelly, Gerald O'Callaghan, Eugene Kelly, Seamus Donnelly, Pádraig McKerney and Jim Lina.
Well, my earliest memories of Jim, his family lived about 200 yards from us in an estate just down the road. We would have been walking to school together up to the Christian Brothers. He was a little bit younger than me. I would have known all the family and the parents quite well. Big family, all highly intelligent, well-read, well-educated people, and all capable of thinking for themselves. And I suppose it's a sign of the times that, like a lot of other areas across the border, Tyrone and Armagh, out of that estate, a lot of people got caught up in the Troubles. I suppose in some sense they were born at the right time or the wrong time, depending on one's perspective. Jim was a likeable young fellow, good sense of humour, impish. The politics here of 69-70 changed utterly because we had an influx of people born out of Belfast. Jim would have seen that coming into the Red Cross Centre in Monaghan. We had also a big influx of people who literally came on the run after internment in 71, so we had a lot of people in here from Tyrone, Armagh, South Derry, Fermanagh, and to a lesser extent Derry City. So he would have been politicised by that. My first recollection of Jim actually being involved in anything was the night of a riot round at the Garda Barracks in early 72. Jim was subsequently charged with possession of a petrol bomb. As a matter of fact, I gave him a bit of a talking to the next day for being actually involved in it at all. But within a short period of time, he had joined the movement and would have joined one of the most active. This area was pivotal at the time because of its geographical position. Tyrone to the north, Fermanagh to the west, and Armagh to the east. So a lot of stuff happened here, a lot of people were coming through, and he became a very active volunteer and was injured then, went to jail. And I would say in Jailey that he became highly politicised. When he came out, he was the same man, but he knew what he was at. There was a strategy, a strategic overview of what was necessary, and got back into the thing immediately. As a matter of fact, would have re-energised the whole area. Things would have got a little flat here at the time, and Jim, he gave leadership when it was necessary. And certainly in the 70s, middle 70s to early 80, would have been a member of one of the most feared and effective units of the IRA anywhere in the country. And the British knew that, and they devoted all the resources, as did the authorities and the Free State people here. I mean, Jim was hounded by the Gardaí. His family, like a lot of families in the north, suffered terribly as a consequence of running up and down to jail. And from a personal experience, and I know as a personal friend of the family, that his brother's death, Michael's death, was devastating for them. I don't think the family have ever got over it. How would any? And myself and Jim are particularly good friends. As a matter of fact, he lived with us off and on. This was his home, the room that this video's been shot in. Jim Lane sat at that table and had his breakfast and his dinner many's a day with others. He was respected as such by his comrades and feared by his enemies as such. But he wasn't a militarist in the strict sense. He didn't see the war as being the means towards an end, or indeed the ends towards a mean. It was part of an overall struggle. Jim was actually elected in Monaghan to the council, by accident rather than by design, I must say, but when he got the job he did it to the best of his ability, and this is while he was at an active service with Loughgall Nairn. As a matter of fact, I used to prepare the briefings for him. He'd sit at that table prior to the Monday night meeting, and I had a list of things for him to discuss, and he saw it in its totality, and obviously that is part of his strategic overview. I had the privilege of succeeding him. I took a seat on the council. They refused to co-opt me, so we were elected. But shortly after that, and we were all young and naive, I suppose, the money lenders came to this town on business, and they had run up a client list of maybe 300 or 400, and they were charging extortionate interest, and I had publicly tried to deal with it. So to make a long story short, Jim intervened, basically ran them out of town. But I mean, that was typical Jim. He thought that it wasn't just about planting bombs or firing shots at the Brits. These were people, rogues, sharks, in creaming the poor people of Monaghan, and he just thought the same fight, the same battle, and did what needed to be done, and did it successfully. And they didn't land back afterwards. He could be very persuasive when necessary. As a matter of fact, he threw all the files into a fireplace. But we look back now, and I say it's just part of the overall Jim that I knew. Job well done. And most of the people who benefited wouldn't have even realised that what he had done on their behalf. He said to me afterwards, the only mistake we made was that we didn't get the people to borrow 5,000 each off them before we ran them out of town. He was probably right in retrospect. That's typical Jim. Well, the Friday night that Jim was killed, I simply will never forget. I was working in my bar, and reports came through about something that had happened at Loughgall. And obviously I had no prior knowledge of the event, but I had good reason knowing Jim, and indeed I knew most of the lads who were killed there. I had been in jail with quite a few of them myself. I knew because of the size and nature of the attack that it was a good chance that Jim would have been involved, along with the others. When the confirmation came through, I closed the bar, utterly shocked. Actually, my wife, Anne, took Jim's mother, Carmel, down to Craigavon to identify the body. And Anne would have been as close to Jim as I was in many respects. Very, very fond of him. The funeral, the waiting, the events in Emmy Vale, and then the long 2 days before we buried him, they're all a blur in retrospect. I know I got very little sleep. I did one thing on the morning of the funeral, which I was glad I did, and subsequently, when the body came out of the flat where he had been living, we got local fellas, just friends of his from the Tully area and Monaghan generally. They carried his body up to the cathedral, and then the movement took over afterwards, and that's what Jim would have wanted himself, because he was a Monaghan town man first and foremost, and those lads who carried his coffin that day, to this day, are proud of it. They've counted a great privilege to have been, and that's the way Jim would have wanted it, so I'm glad I made that call. The effect on his family, second death in the family. It's what can you say? I mean, it was mirrored all over the north that time. All the funerals, as Jerry Adams said, the endless funerals. But Jim's death just strengthened our own resolve here to keep going and finish the job.
Memories of him. He was a very, very witty person. No matter where he went, he was always a centre of attraction and fun. And there was one occasion, a number of us up in Loughgall for a weekend, and then on the way back home again, a regular stop would be to John Joe McGuire's up in Leitrim. So back in John Joe McGuire's bar, there'd be a few drinks going and a bit of a chat and all the rest. But Cahill and all was there along with us, and one of the occasions we're talking about it was about maybe a parents was always at them, the activity they're at and all the rest and giving out. Cahill was always saying, my father's always giving out to me. He says, been out and not been home. And Jim was referring that his father was the same. So Cahill here was referring again that his father was always at a concert at him. So Jim referred that his father was the same, but Jim's father was worse. So Cahill says, well, how do you make that out, Jim? And Jim turned around, he says, how it is? He says, simple, he says, because my father knows what he's talking about. So they left it that there's big slag over Cahill on that occasion, but he's always the same time centre of attraction, no matter where he went, what he was doing.
He was in Portlaoise at the time, and I went to visit him one day, and in the course of the conversation anyway, politics as usual came into it, and Jim started talking about abstentionism, which was in vogue at the time, and I was reeling him and picking out of him about it's going to have to go. No, there's under no circumstances, it was so important to the whole struggle. And he lost the head, and he started roaring and shouting about the French Revolution and how important this whole thing was. So the hill hunt, I says, look it, I'm away home, you can go in and settle your head in there. So away we went on. So I'd say must have been 2 years after it when the whole abstentionism thing came up down here again. So I was a delegate to the Ardèche, and went to the Ardèche, into the Mansion House. First person I met at the door was the Bowl Jim, and him dressed to the 99s and big smile on him. And first he came over, running over to me, well, where do you think I was going to go? I says, not a hope, Jim, it's not going to get through. Why? Says I, it's wrong, it's going to cause a split, and we're not up for that. Oh, he says, you're wrong, that's where you're wrong. It's very important, this. I says, what the hell are you talking about, you blondie frigga? What about the day you were roaring in Portlaoise and tearing down the wire at me? You have to move with the times, Times change, you have to move. So that is one of my recollections of Jim.
What Pete would have said on Jim in the jail. One of the boys was just talking after the elections we had here now, previous in the north. Some of the boys that was in jail with him was telling me Sinn Féin that time back in the early 80s would have come out in a bad poll in the north. They'll come out on the scale, both a small scale I guess, so much, when the SDLP would have been in a very high scale. And Jim's approach was to boys that time, he says, if the SDLP was like that and Sinn Féin was like that, he says, wouldn't be in here, or we wouldn't have to fire a shot. So he was very much tuned into maybe the way they should be going forward, or if it was that way, that no lad would be in jail if that was the situation is today.
Me got in, and I was getting tight enough to get a woman, but Jim had always women all around it. He says, for you, you take her. I'm sort of sick of her. But then, so I took her out and I got into the job. I only got the length of the job, but the dance was over anyway. And the next thing, Jim, he came out with 2 hands on length. He had nobody else. So gee, Penny stopped taking her back on him. I called them all the cunts of the day. And then you'd land back to their digs. They used to call it the Heartbreak Hotel. I don't know, you mean it? Belgian Square, Heartbreak Hotel. And big James Fox, he had a big pot of champ and raw eggs through it. And you're fed then after. So that is it, that is build up your thing again the road. Get the build up for the next night. Feed it jumping raw eggs.
Marty, how was your father been here?
He was been here 40 years. He lived around the city did.
And close to the border, so about from
about half a mile from the border from here.
And the likes of Jim.
I would have stayed here many a time when safe houses, you know.
He got on very well with your father.
He did. He got on very well, and I spent a lot of time meeting hobbies and leisure time. You come down to visit him and everything, you know.
Your father, he was one that used to say set up to all hours night reading books and
He
studying.
would.
He big lectures with Jim about politics.
Oh, you could be there to 5 o'clock in the morning talking to him. You know, we'd be there all night. He'd sit up all night talking to you. He loved to see like people coming in, you know, to talk about old times and stuff.
Very good. These steps, Marty, been used a lot of times here. Knocking the door, banging the doors here.
Plenty of time was right.
We've got why nobody answered now for you?
No.
Right?
Unfortunately not.
That's a bad one now, you know.
And there in the era.
Aye.
He was robbed here then just before he left, wasn't he?
He was 6 months.
6 months before he died.
Yeah.
So they've been kind of happy to have the likes of Jim about that night.
True. He wouldn't have happy with it about like.
It wouldn't happen.
Let it be Dublin, Cork, or anywhere around one can tell. There's always seemed to be a guard following him. I say if that the guard in the present at that time, what they were hauled with patrol cars, or even if he got out of a car and walked up the street, they got out and walked up after him. No matter where he went, they were always there.
Taking down times and dates from Jim Liner or Pete or Lawrence.
We passed by.
And then they compiled that sort of a dossier on them. Used to laugh at it. Jim used to shoot around and laugh at him. Maybe tip him in the shirt, then writing away about it. Maybe Jim would run around and then tip him. What are you writing him about me today? You know.
Oh, they didn't even try to hide it or anything, you know, they were just keeping there. The time we used to have a place out in Scotland, used to stay in a house in Scotland, remember the hole in the wall they called it. And used to be road all set on the road all the time watching. Even he was in a house, they'd sit outside in the front of that house all the time till he come out. And if they thought there was a back door, they'd all get a second patrol car in to watch the back door. So he didn't get out any road.
Just after the death of Seamus McAween, and one of his things was if anything happened to him, he asked Jimmy McAween, who's dead now, also he asked Jimmy that his remains be brought back to McAween's house. And he thought a lot of both Seamus and he thought a lot of the McAween family. So, but Bose on, as you were saying, Carl, like everybody knowing his followed his name, Jim Liner, automatically carried the name of the Republican movement with him, so it was. So it's just not high profile, no matter where he went, no matter what he associated with. But at the same time, when the dole used to sign on every day, maybe or every Tuesday, maybe in the dole, or you maybe get your money on a Thursday. And one occasion, I remember it was around £19, or at that time you'd have got on the dole. But and then I remember going around then to the sports shop and buying a compass, which was £16. So buying this compass for me, wanted to work on it for a habit. So he bought that in at a £16. So that left him with £3 to do him for the rest of the week. But money was never an issue. No. Money was never a problem. I wasn't worrying about how I'm going to survive, what the case is, because he knew he was welcome no matter where he went in North Monaghan, and all the houses where he went to, he got his fed and his grub, whatever the case is, and that's all he cared about him. The money wasn't even an issue, so he had £3 to do him. That wasn't a problem. Like, yeah.
Well, I remember him playing football. I'd say maybe I suppose under 16 to minors. I'd say somewhere in around that region. He seemed to be quite a good footballer, and at that time there was a lot of boys, you know, would have thought Jim was a tight, hard fella on the football field, and well, wouldn't have been afraid of him, but he was there or thereabouts, you know, well able to look after himself. Yeah.
My earliest memories of Jim was at an Easter parade in Monaghan here. He was inspecting his colour party. He was in charge of it. And he had come out a fella, had a few drinks in him and put him out, wouldn't let him take part in the parade anymore, you know. That all was stuck in my memory, you know, about Jim. Also remember Seamus McIlvain's funeral. Jim was in charge of the colour party there also. On the morning of the funeral, the colour party come out onto the street at McIlvain's, and Jim come out, walked in front of them and inspected them and tucked everybody's burying right, and was just very concerned that everybody was looking their best on the day of the funeral. Fierce attention to detail. Everybody had a bit of spick and span as far as Jim was concerned.
Another thing was about himself that he always was thinking of the families and the houses that he used and the bases that he operated from and things like that. And on occasions he'd talk about maybe one of the downfalls that the Republican movement would have, especially families that had lost ones, like the McIlvain family he'd been always thinking of and things like that. When a family loses a member of the family, is enough a blow to them, and a downfall the Republican movement would have that we should be calling to houses more often, instead of maybe at times we do call but don't call enough, or whatever the case is. And this occasion just we should always continue a good link between the families, and after all what they did come through in the loss. And it's one thing that he always thought of, that was a downfall that we maybe had, we shouldn't be calling, the Republican movement should be calling more often than what we would be doing.
I remember Jim getting out of Loughgall, I think it was around October time, and was it do hell for him in the Lakeside Hotel in Monaghan here, and it was a terrible good night, and we went on into the very early hours of the morning, and there was a party afterwards.
I suppose, you know, in relation to where we are now, you know, some people will say, even in the distant, not far back there, you know, about such a person didn't die for this and didn't die for that. I think that Jim Lynagh, and probably more, but my experience of him, what he said to me on that day about moving with the times, I think it proved that Jim could see as far forward as anybody, you know. And I think that for people to say that such a volunteer didn't die for that, this or that, nobody can speak for them people, because if they're here today, they could just be like Jim.
Was accompanied by a paramilitary escort. As the procession reached the village of Emmy Vale, 3 masked men emerged from the crowd and fired a volley of shots. A crowd of several hundred people cheered as the gunmen disappeared. They were to make their getaway in 2 vans. The crowd surged round the vehicles as Irish police and detectives tried to get through. The security forces began to fire shots into the air in an effort to disperse them. A police car was overturned as people grew increasingly hostile. A detective and 2 policemen were caught in a ditch. In the chaos, the vans carrying the gunmen got away and the crowd began to disperse. One detective trapped in the overturned car was freed by colleagues. The incident will embarrass the Irish government, happening on a day in which 2 IRA funerals in Northern Ireland passed without trouble. But in the past, it's scenes like this surrounding funeral processions in the north which have concerned both the church and the police.
Hometown of Monaghan, Guardian troops set up roadblocks, searching every car and checking the identities of people inside. But it wasn't until just 20 minutes before Lynagh's coffin was due to leave his flat in the centre of Monaghan that upwards of 200 Gardaí in riot gear marched into town and tried to take up positions near his home. But it was quickly clear that the Gardaí had left it too late, for dozens of mourners swiftly linked arms to keep the Gardaí away from Lynagh's flat. For a time the situation was tense, with an angry standoff between the Gardaí and mourners who thought the police would push their way through the ranks. But that push never came, not even when Lynagh's coffin, paramilitary trappings and all, emerged from his home. And the Gardaí could only stand and watch as an IRA colour party followed it out several minutes later, marching defiantly to form up alongside the coffin. There were 9 men and 2 women in the colour party, and responding to commands in Irish, they saluted their dead leader. There was no display of guns, however, and within minutes the IRA men and women marched back into Lynagh's home, to the cheers and applause of the several thousand onlookers. As the cortege set off for St McCartan's Cathedral, the Gardaí moved in to shadow the mourners, who again linked arms. At one point, Seamus Shannon, who was extradited to the north and acquitted of the murder of Sir Norman Strong and his son, carried the coffin. Shannon is married to a sister of Lina's. The dead man had been wanted in connection with the Strong killings. There was some jostling between mourners and Gardaí en route to the cathedral, where veteran Republican Joe Cahill stood alongside Sinn Féin leaders Gerry Adams and Martin McGuinness. During Requiem Mass, Father Sean Nolan made little reference to the circumstances of Loughgall, a fact attacked later during a graveside oration by Gerry Adams.
Jim Lina died of injustice. At Mass this morning, I thought he may have died of pneumonia. Loughgall will become a tombstone for British policy in Ireland.
Gerry was the youngest of a family of 15. He was born in Tullymore on the 8th of January 1958, and he went to Tullymore Primary School. On the first day of school, he was sitting alongside Paul Corrigan, his mate, and him and Paul fell out, and Gerard stuck a pen in Paul, and Paul stuck a pen back in Gerard, and I think Paul has that mark in his chest yet. They were lifelong friends, and I think when Gerard died, Paul was still more hurt than anyone else. He's still a lifelong friend of Gerard's. That photograph was taken at a christening of one of Paul's children. Gerard also done groomsman for Paul at his wedding. Gerard was in the cash and in remand, and Paul was lifted. And he was taken in as well in remand. And Gerard had visited down visiting him, and Paul had visited as well. And Gerard said to Paul, "I didn't know you came into Loughgall to see me." When Gerard was very young, my mummy died. Mummy had been bad 5 years before she died, and she had a stroke, and times have been very rough about our house. Times have been hard, you know. Gerard was 12 years of age whenever Mummy died. He had been only 7 whenever Mummy took bad, and he had a rough life. There's nobody to look after him. He just got what was going in the house the same as the rest of us. Tullymore Primary School at 11 years of age, and he went to St Bridget's, where he stayed till he was 15 years of age. He left there and he worked in the local community along with Malachi Kieran at the Mushrooms. He worked with Jim Mann at the Mushrooms as well, and he would have went to Brenton and Bernie Smith as well. Sometimes he went to Paddy Mallon's when Paddy was busy at the Mushrooms as well. All times he would have been with Jean Duffy at the Bricklayer along with Jean Duffy. Gerard played a lot of underage football, him and Paul Corrigan, and he played a lot of road bowls, and he'd have played cards Mary Ann's of a Monday night along with Jimmy Mullen and all the friends. So he would, and they wouldn't play the cards, they wouldn't start the cards till Gerard come in case there's somebody cheating, and Gerard kept the thing going so he did. Well, there was one Monday night they were playing cards, and Gerard was watching a couple of boys playing, and they weren't posting the money in, and Gerard said this kitty's short of money. So start laughing at Gerard. The next thing Gerard says, "I'll give the next man one more warning, and if he doesn't post, I'll be lifting the money and I'll be getting up and drinking it." So the boys started laughing at Gerard, thought Gerard was codding, but Gerard, he waited for 5 minutes to post, and nobody posted. Gerard put the hand out and lifted the money and up and put it in his pocket and started drinking the money at the pub. When Gerard left school, Gerard would have been watching the civil rights marches, and he wouldn't have been going to them, but he would have been discussing all that was going on with the likes of Brendan Smith and Bernie, maybe Eugene Duffy at the time, and Paul Corrigan and Paddy Mullen. That's who would have brought Gerard into the civil rights movement at that time. In 1875, Jared joined the Republic, moved over to Ahern, and East Tyrone Brigade out of Ahern. And Jared was an Armagh man, and it was a very proud day for Jared the day he joined them. Jared kept a very clean, squeaky image, and kept himself, said nothing to nobody, just listened and kept walking on about his business. He was arrested in 1980 with Pádraig McKierney at Bambob on active service, and he was in Loughgall on remand, and the people in the community got an awful surprise whenever they heard Jared O'Callaghan been lifted and along with Pádraig McKierney. They wouldn't even have known the two men knew one another. But Jared was on remand, and then he was sentenced to 6 years in Loughgall. Whenever Jared got out of Loughgall, he resumed membership of the East Tyrone Brigade of the IRA, and Jared was a quartermaster. Jared moved a lot of stuff across the border in his own time. Jared was liable to come out of a hole in the hedge with a bag of stuff and hand it to a man in a car. That is Jared's priority. Nobody knew where Jared was going. Nobody knew Jared's business. Jared kept the whole thing to himself.
This was the biggest single loss of life for the Provisionals in the present Troubles, and while the authorities braced themselves for the inevitable backlash, the IRAs seek to solve how the security forces so effectively thwarted their plans. There's no doubt Friday night's operation at Loughgall was mounted by police and troops well aware and well prepared for exactly what was planned, whether their information came from a mole within the ranks of the IRA.
England with a load for Armagh and Alley, saving for Armagh and Alley. And I went to Glasgow first, and I came down the night to Carlisle on Saturday morning, and I went to Friday night and I went to bed. And I got up on Saturday morning, I was sitting taking a cup of tea, and a lorry driver came in from 6 Mile Cross, and he said there was a bit of a disaster in the north last night. So I went and I phoned the wife, as there was no mobile phones that time, and I phoned the wife, and she said she would come home. She said Jared was killed. So I phoned the man I was working for, and I got hold of him, and he says, Francie, give him that lorry and drive that lorry straight to the boat. So I left the lorry in Cairn Ryan, and I come home in the boat, and I got left the lorry driver right to Armagh, where my wife met me in Armagh. When Jared, after Jared been shot, I didn't know where I was coming or going. I didn't know what to think. Saturday was a very, very long day, as Jared was still in Craigavon, the morgue in Craigavon, and the people were all around the house, and they were all crying, and they couldn't believe it. The people couldn't believe it. It hit the community, an awful sad blow for the community. And then on Sunday we went to Craigavon to lift Jared's remains. Now the police said Jared's remains was to come by Armagh, and there was a lot of people around the shambles in Armagh waiting at Jared, expecting Jared to come home. But it's typical of the police. They diverted Jared down the motorway, up the motorway, and down to Loughgall, and up the motorway to Aglish, and up through Aglish. And then before we left the morgue, the police tied a rammed car so they wouldn't get in behind the hearse. They wanted to be behind the hearse, but the neighbours didn't let them in. They had to stay 5 or 6 cars back at least. But whenever we got up through Aglish, there was a lot of people didn't even know Jared was home. They were standing at the shambles.
Callaghan, thought to have been an IRA quartermaster in Tyrone. The coffin, draped with a tricolour and with his burying gloves placed on top, was preceded by a lone piper as it was borne from his isolated family home at Milltown near Benburb. An IRA colour party consisting of 4 uniformed men had carried the coffin part of the way down the lane, out of sight of cameramen and reporters who were kept away. The start of the funeral had been delayed by intense security. Mourners complained that the area around Benburb was saturated with checkpoints as soldiers searched every car. But police again kept a discreet distance in line with their new policy. Several Land Rovers waited out of sight of the house and went in front of the hearse on its way to the main road, where more police waited to escort the cortege to Tullysaran 4 miles away. Sinn Féin's Danny Morrison led the procession and later gave the graveside oration. There was just one incident when mourners attacked a man thought to be a police photographer, and 1 arrest was made. At the Church of the Immaculate Conception, the priest, Father Patrick Campbell, in a strongly worded address, said as a fact that as long as injustice exists in areas touching human dignity, there will be violent reaction. He said Catholic nationalists have been the victims of gross injustice. Their political situation is intolerable, and there is no sign of redress. It's out of this situation that many deaths have come. Jared O'Callaghan is one of thousands, he said. How many more will there be?
The remains in the house with the tricolour and Jared's coffin, and we carried him to the end of the lane. But whenever the top gate, we had a lock, the top gate with a lock, in case the police were coming into the yard, or into our street. And then we carried Jared on out. But whenever we got out onto the main road, there was a very, very heavy surveillance of police and army. And that was the whole way to Tullysaran Chapel. And whenever we got to Tully's near Marianne's pub, we carried Jared from Marianne's pub to the chapel. And both sides of the road there was an awful, still army, and they were in around the graveyard everywhere, so they were. We got great support from the local community, but most of all we got great support from Father Campbell. Father Campbell preached a great sermon over Jared. In fact, to still people talking about the sermon Father Campbell preached over Jared. And Jared had a massive funeral. Everybody in the country come to Jared's funeral. And Danny Morrison gave a very, very fitting oration at Jared's grave. Jared's loss to the family and myself was a very, very big loss, as me and Jared would have been fairly friendly all during our years, and especially his nephews and nieces. They missed Jared very badly as well. Down through the later years in Jared's life before he was killed, Jared spent a lot of time around Chiappa and Galway, and everyone in Chiappa had a great time for Jared, and Jared had a great time for them as well. And anything Jared tried to do, Jared done it right. The way he dressed his own accord, and we are very, very proud of what Jared done for the armed struggles.
My name is Mrs. Maura McKerney. I'm the mother of Pádraig McKerney, who was killed at Loughgall. Pádraig was the third of a family of 6. He was born in December 1954. He went to school in both College Land Primary School and St. John's Moy Primary School, and from that to St. Patrick's Academy in Dungan. The person that was very happy with his own young crowd playing football down in the field there, and you know the way youngsters act and have a good time, but he also could sit and talk to older people and was very interested in the historical interests of the older people, what they could tell him, like grandfathers and granduncles and grandmothers and things like that. He was always interested in listening to what they had to say. He had a terrible dislike of the way things were, and he also had a dislike of the way the world was treated. He always said that who had the right to treat people in any country in the world the way they're treated. Pádraig was arrested in 1973, and he was only 6 weeks in prison at that time. He was supposed to have blown up a post office, but
and he was still a student?
And he was still a student at Dungan Academy. He was only in the O-level grade and would be going on to A-level grade.
And he was never convicted of that offence?
No, no.
And yet he paid a high price?
And he paid a high price because the man that was head of the school at the time wouldn't take him back into the school after that. The only thing he could do then was go to work with his father in the shop full time.
And he returned to active service?
And he returned to active service with the Republican Movement, IRA.
Right.
In 1974 he was arrested again, and at that time he was sentenced and put through to Gilligan Prison in County Derry.
Whilst he was on remand in Crumlin Road Jail, there was tragedy befell the family here.
And when he was in Crumlin Road Jail, his brother Sean was killed in an explosion out the Dungan Road. And Pádraig wouldn't have got parole or bail or any of those things to let him come home to the funeral, so he never saw his brother Sean.
And what conditions were there for the prisoners that were
at the cache?
At the cache.
Sleep in the fresh air.
And some of the prisoners were actually chained to poles?
To poles and things like that, yes. It was a real torture. Maggie Thatcher's laws.
Now, Pádraig had a little food with him when he got
2 packets of biscuits.
And that was the entire food that whole cage had?
25th, 1983. The darkest hour in British penal history. 38 Republican terrorists did what was until then regarded as impossible. They broke out of Northern Ireland's top security prison, the Maze, near Lisburn. The IRA had scored a morale-boosting victory for Republicans. For Margaret Thatcher's government, it was a propaganda disaster.
It is a very grave incident indeed, the most serious in our prison history. The Secretary of State...
The thing when he got the head stitched was in the crumb where he was flung down the stairs by one of the screws when he wouldn't do something he was told to do or ordered. For he would be stubborn, he wouldn't be easy put across, you know.
What was the height of, I don't think it's right to call it medical care, but what did the screws do to him when they split his head open?
Well, as I said, he was flung down the stairs and the metal bars of the stairs was on the head, and they got a needle and thread, an ordinary black thread, the same as you were sewing a stitch in your button on your trousers or something, and they sewed the head. It was terrible, you know, to see them.
Maura, one of Porrick's closest comrades was Gerard O'Callaghan, and that's who he was arrested with in the late 70s.
Yes.
And unfortunately, he was also one of the comrades that died with him.
Died with him in Loughgall. Was executed with him in Loughgall, if you'd say it properly. His key difficulty was that to be at 26 counties, they had their mind made up that they were going to fight for a 32 and get there. To a large extent, it made him unpopular for a certain grouping. And I want to make that perfectly clear. Not everybody, but there was one group that disagreed, one group agreed and all that. You know, could see his point, another group couldn't. And Angela had to go to the morgue to recognise his body and all that kind of thing.
And come with the bad news.
And then, unfortunately, Angela had to go alone to recognise her brother, Kev. Thomas was in prison, and Margaret couldn't come home, and can't yet come home.
And one of the ironies at the time of Porrick, at the time of Sean's death, Porrick was in jail and unable to come home.
That's right.
And it was almost history repeating itself.
Aye, when Thomas was in jail and couldn't come home to Porrick's, and we tried every way to get him, and you know, asked every way and made every promise that we'd guarantee he'd go back, and they wouldn't let him come out.
And what are your memories of the wake and the funeral?
I think one thing that sticks out in my memory, his body and remains were brought home to the house here, and in county the 8 lads that were buried, you know, the political type funeral they give them, you know. What word do you use for that? Military type funeral they give those lads. There was only one buried each day, and Porrick happened to be the last one. So the remains were here for 6 days or something, 5 days. And there was thousands of people come through this house. We had some shocking number of mass cards handed. You know, it was unbelievable. Because you talk about the people don't care about people. They do eventually, you know. People I never saw in my life before came through this house. It was unbelievable.
And even in death?
And even in death he was respected. That's the way I seen it with the amount of people. Now if the like of Colin and his father and them kind of people you were friendly with, you know, but there was people I never saw in my life stood in the house. You know, and I haven't seen them since, I wouldn't know them.
But even in death the Crown forces wouldn't leave Porrick's memory alone.
Not all. They lined up the walls around the graveyard there.
Blackberry and gloves had been placed on the tricolour-draped coffin. When the masked men reached the end of the driveway, others stepped forward as pallbearers, and the masked men disappeared towards the house. As they did so, the crowd closed in around the building to provide them with cover to escape undetected. The police, however, made no attempt to close in, and the funeral continued on towards St John's Church, just a few hundred yards away in the same street. At St John's, Father James Devlin told mourners that Patrick McKierney's death was sudden and tragic. He prayed for peace and for an end to the spiral of violence which has caused hatred and bitterness. Patrick McKierney was one of the Maze escapers, and it's believed he was third in command of the IRA men in Loughgall last Friday. He was buried alongside his brother Sean, one of 2 IRA men who died 13 years ago to the day while handling a bomb in Dungannon. Another brother, Tommy, is serving life in the maze for the murder of a UDR soldier. McKierney's sister, Margaret, didn't attend today's funeral. Since 1975, Scotland Yard.
My son, Porrig, was laid to rest on the 13th of May, which happened, unfortunately, to be the anniversary of my other son, Sean, who died 13 years before that, on the 13th of May. He was killed in tragic circumstances because of British oppression in Northern Ireland. He had a sad life in a funny way. Happy life as a young lad, playing about with his brothers and sisters, and still, by the time he came to 17 years of age, his life changed very sadly. Respected their belief, and you weren't going to disrespect their beliefs. I don't think you have the right to. And the man was fighting for his country, and fighting for his people, and for generations, for 800 years. The same went on in the country. It wasn't this year it started, or the last 10 years or 20 years it started. I think any mother, it's very heartbreaking to stand at the grave of your three sons. It doesn't matter what political party you belong to, who you belong to, what you belong to. You're the mother of your child, and that son in the grave, or that person in the grave belonging to you, you've lost your own friend, your best friend, your child. There's no one can say it's any different. And no matter what, as I said before, no matter what politics they belong to, the families that suffer, suffer. They suffer equally. They might be inclined to pretend they don't, but they do. Ireland's history, there's no thanks for it.
I'm Paula McElduff, sister of volunteer Patrick Kelly. Patrick was the oldest in a family of 5, and we were all born in Carrickfergus, County Antrim. Patrick was the oldest in the family. He was the only boy, and of course, being the only boy then, he was spoilt in our eyes by everybody. He was a good brother in that, like, he did have, like, we fought sometimes, like, but most times, most of my memories would be of keeping us going and keeping each other, you know. We all would have maybe teamed up. The two oldest girls would have teamed up together, and the youngest, sometimes we would have picked on her, and Patrick and me used to team up together and do silly things on each other, you know, stupid things that we would call stupid, but I suppose they were like just ordinary brother and sister things. Whenever we were put out of Carrickfergus, Patrick stayed behind for a year or 2 years to finish his secondary school education. So when we were living in Dungannon, he stayed with an uncle in Carrickfergus, which was a big thing for us, because when we moved to Dungannon then, there was only the 4 girls in the house, which was a bit strange. But whenever he come to Dungannon then, we lived in Lisnahull, and of course the four girls were pushed into one of the rooms. Mummy and Daddy were in the other room, and Patrick had a small room to himself, which I used to look into and say, this will be my room someday when you get married. But even though the fact that I wasn't the oldest girl, but I just thought it was my place to take his room whenever he left. He went to the St Patrick's Boys Academy to finish his A-levels, and it come then to an abrupt end, because every day that he was coming home from school with the uniform on, he was stopped by the UDR and asked for his name and address, and all the stuff was taken out of his bag, and people used to come to the door to tell Mummy and the rest of us, or whoever was at home, that we needed to go down because he was maybe on the New Well Road or something. And some of the incidents would have happened on the New Well Road, or at the bottom of Listen Hall near our house, or else they would have got him what we would call, you know, really the loyalist side of Dungannon, around Perry Street, Church Street area. So after a meeting with the school principal, my daddy thought that it would be a good idea all round, because he wasn't getting much support for getting harassed coming from school, that he would leave and go to the tech, because he wanted to do a course on business studies and accountancy. So during the summer then, Daddy worked in Kilrit Power Station, and he got Patrick a job, you know, just driving the digger and doing general labouring work. And he seemed to have liked it all right, and he stayed there for a few years, and then an office job came up in Kilrit Power Station for Patrick. So Daddy managed to get him that, because he had been there a long time. So he got in there and got his qualifications from the tech and got a full-time job in Kilrit Power Station. So in the late 70s, it was a very dangerous time to be working around Kilrit Power Station, because it was about maybe 10 miles outside Carrickfergus, and it would be a very loyalist dominated area. So Daddy had taken early retirement, so Patrick only stayed on for a while, but then after a few people, genuine people at work would have said to him that it wouldn't be a safe place to be, he left and come back to Dungannon to work in the Dungannon Fireplace Company, owned by a good family friend, Seamus McNulty. There he sold fireplaces and done all the account work for Seamus, and in fact I ended up getting that job after Patrick was killed. The fireplace shop that Patrick worked in was situated in Little Scott Street in Dungannon, and he got on really well with there was 3 people working it, and then there was a few units in that place as well, different shops, a restaurant and a vegetable shop, fruit and vegetable shop. And the fruit and vegetable shop was owned by a Protestant couple, a man, and Patrick got on particularly well with them, because he would have went in and out of the shop every day. And even though we learned later that they were very shocked at who Patrick actually was, they actually closed their shop on the morning of the funeral till the funeral was over, as a mark of respect, which we thought was a very nice thing for them to do. Patrick got married to Kathleen, as we knew her, Kathleen McKenna from Dungannon, in April 1979. They were blessed with 4 children. As far as I'm aware, Kathleen was the only girl that Patrick ever went with. They were happily married, and that, you know, Patrick would have done a lot of things for Kathleen in the house, and vice versa, like they worked as a team. And when their first child, Padraig, was born, Patrick was he was like a child with a new toy, just paraded him everywhere. And I remember Kieran and Padraig and Trina, when Trina was born, I remember Padraig and Trina going to see, Patrick struck up a very good friendship with Cardinal O'Fee at the time, and I can remember vividly taking him to visit him when he got released from jail. And I just remember Padraig and Trina swinging off the curtains in the window, and Patrick came out and he was a wee bit cross, but he laughed. I says, I never seen anything like that in my life. I says, all I could see was the 2 swinging back and forward on the curtains, and he laughed and he says, I never put in an hour like it in my life. Patrick worked extremely hard in his home life and in his work life, but we believe that he worked extremely hard for his country as well. And I suppose it was amazing to watch him, to see how he managed to juggle the 3 things. You know, he would have went to work early in the morning, come back in, got his dinner and left straight away, and went out to wherever he was going, and maybe wouldn't come back till late at night. And I always remember sometimes at night there, if I had went over to his house, he would have been up doing brickwork for the fireplace company that he worked in. So his whole time was just devoted to them 3 things. Our memories, well, bad memories would be of the constant harassment that Patrick got. I suppose they probably would have intensified after he was released from the Supergrass case. One particular instance is recorded in a book, Women in Struggle, where Patrick and Kathleen were actually put under house arrest, and nobody could get in or out of their house. I had called to take the children to school, and we managed to get them out after negotiating for a while, but I remember Patrick hanging out he managed to get to the back room window, and opened up the window to shout out at people who had been banging bin lids and that outside, and some RUC man actually bit him in the back, and there was actually a photograph taken of it. I think it might have been in Republican News, of the bite mark that had been left in his back. He had a great interest in Irish music. He liked the likes of the barleycorn and the wolf tones. Many's time, if you had pulled up outside the houses, the windows would have been wide open, and the wolf tones might have been playing full blast. He particularly liked Joe McDonald's song that the wolf tones used to play, and he had a particular love for Bobby Sands. He had a picture of Bobby Sands framed, and he had a table underneath it in the sitting room of his house with candles. He used to keep the candle lit underneath it anytime an anniversary or something like that come up. He took a particular interest in bridge when he was in the Crumlin Road jail in the early 80s. He used to go travel with an uncle and two family friends every Tuesday night to Cookstown to play bridge. He was very creative when he was in jail, writing poems and doing Irish language writings on tissue paper, and he had one that he gave to Mummy with St Bridget's prayer and a picture of Ireland drew around it. He was one of the colour party at Martin Herson's funeral, and just a story that would be whenever the cortege was coming up one of the hills in Kappa, the colour party had actually stopped within yards of myself and my mother, and Mummy panicked and said, "I think that's our Patrick there," and she was ready to grab him out of the colour party. So I think it would have been a very proud moment for Patrick to be part of that colour party, because I do believe that the hunger strikers were very important to him, each and every one of them. In the weeks before Patrick was killed, he really enjoyed the time that he spent with the children. Keenan and Trina and Padraig used to be outside playing, and Kathleen was due to have her fourth baby round about a week or so after Patrick was killed, and when he went out to the back door of the house to call them in, he used to call Padraig and Trina and Keenan, and he used to shout Siobhan to see what Siobhan sounded like as a name, because that's the name that he had chose to pick for the child if it was going to be a wee girl. And he particularly enjoyed his time with them, and he particularly enjoyed Keenan trying to form sentences, and was really looking forward to him being able to talk full sentences and all. And Patrick was a great son, brother and father to his family, and a dedicated to his country, and he would have been, I have no doubt in my mind, or my family's mind, that he would have been very proud of his family today.
See, the house hasn't changed much anyway.
No.
The Mullimore Park sign's still up on it, and the white fence there, it's gone anyway. But there was no real change to the grass, it was always long.
Nobody cut it?
There's you got knocked down with a bicycle down there, see it in Old Burns.
That's Mummy and Daddy's room there. That's the living room. Me and Patrick's room was at the front.
I was only 4 whenever we left, wasn't it? I can remember parties in the garden and playing on the slide, birthdays.
This is where Daddy's buried here. It's a Republican plot in Eden Dark. Just up the road on Carlin Road, Dungannon. Granda Vincent Kelly's buried along with his father, Willie John Jr. On opposite is just Willie John Sr. He is a close comrade of Thomas Clark back in the days of Easter Rising.
I actually think Granny has that photograph up on her living room wall.
That picture was actually taken in the early 1900s. And I can actually remember Granda saying that they were commanders, both commanders of the Dungannon battalion at different times.
I know there's not much that I can really talk about because I was young when Daddy died and we didn't get the chance to spend enough time with him while he was here. But I know what kind of a person he was and how he is thought of by a lot of people and how respected he is, as well as the other 7 men that were killed with him. And also not forgetting the Hughes family that lost their father as well. I would talk to Daddy along with Granda Kelly in my prayers at night or when I feel the need and I know that they're looking after us. I'm sure you all have your own personal memories of Daddy, very different from mine, but there are a few that I have. I remember that he burst my dummy with a pin when I must have been getting too old for it. I remember tasting Guinness that he had in a glass, just something small. And I also remember the night that he was killed as well. But at the wake, I didn't really understand what was happening myself. Me and Padraig, I remember were running around playing in the garden. I remember Shane McNulty gave me 50p and I was going around asking everybody for money. I thought that's what I had to do. But I remember asking Mummy where Daddy had gone and she would tell me he was up in the clouds with the angels. Any time that we're around our aunts or and grannies, we always get to hear plenty of stories about Daddy, which is always good to hear. At times it's been hard without him and not having him around, and we are constantly being reminded of what happened through books and programs. For myself, and I know that I speak for Padraig, Keenan and Siobhan, that we would love for Daddy to be here with us and watch us grow up, but we understand what he did and why. In one of his letters he wrote while he was in jail, he says that his family means everything to him and that he has strong beliefs and that he is doing it for his children and his children's children, and that he didn't want us to go through what he went through as a child growing up. I also want to mention Mummy and Bert for everything that they've done for us, looking after us and never to let us forget our Daddy. We are very honoured and very proud of who our Daddy is and what he fought for. And there's a little poem which I came across on Daddy's memorial card which I'm going to read out. A father is always patient, kind and true. No other friend in the world will be the same to you. When other friends forsake you, to Father you will return. For all the loving kindness he asks, nothing in return. As we look upon his picture, sweet memories we recall of a face so full of sunshine and a smile for one and all. Sweet Jesus, take this message to our dear Father up above. Tell him how we miss him and give him all our love.
Okay, Q, we're here tonight and we're talking about your memories of your late brother, volunteer Tony Gormley. You were very close in age to Tony. What's your earliest memories of going to school, for instance, with Tony?
Well, I suppose back, early memories would be going to Cabra School there, getting the bus and then a lane there at Armagh or Crowlon, town long we lived in, and going down to Cabra School, just, you know, the yellow bus or the school bus, or whatever you want to call it.
Well, when you got to school, were you glad that you had a bigger brother there?
Oh, I will. That's one advantage I had in life. For Tony is only 13 months or 12 months older than me, and he paved the road for a lot of number of things for me. He always had that to be more sense of security with him in front of you at all the times. For even from going from one class to the next, you'd always hear. He could always tell you the crack, and you knew what to watch out for, and you knew exactly what was in front of you. Like us, principal that time was Master O'Reilly, and he was always looking for lads to do a bit of gardening and a bit of tidying up around the school. So no boy, he had been first to volunteer for that. It got him out from the class and looking into the windows of the boys, and it's better crack than sticking to the books,
But at the same time, Tony would have been quite smart.
Oh, he would have been intelligent, yeah, no boy there, and he could have handled that in of it too, but it was a handier option to get outside with a spade under a lock of bushes or something. But
After Cabra School, what school did Tony go on to then?
Kieran's high school, Ballygalla.
And did you follow on there?
Oh, I come trailing behind as usual. Same thing, he'd have a year over him. I had known a lot of his friends with Tony. They'd have probably bras in my year too. So with no boy, we always had a good friendship with his schoolmates. I was sort of the same team as them too, or same knocked about together in the playground together and all.
And on leaving school, where did Tony go to work?
He did. He started off. He went to an engineering place there up beside Auchnaclay, Packy Loughgall's. He went there with, funny enough, Paul Turney, a friend of his at school too from Macinduff. And the two of them, it's Paul Turney's uncle that owned the place, or was the director. Our lane run from one road to another road and was constantly used by, indeed, anybody at all, but much the security forces there, British Army, UDR, RUC. They've been out, even then they've been around our house, and just searching, usual stuff in around it. We used to walk down to Cross School Disco there, and then would meet up, funny enough, the likes of the artists there, Paul and Brian, and then would walk from there over to Tully's to get Loch of Minerals or stuff, or sweets or some stuff. And I remember different times with at that time there had been Army Land Rovers on the road, and they'd pull in and there'd be an exchange of a bit of guff give or something, But different times like that, they were well aware of the presence of the army in the area and all that. I went to Perskine as a subcontractor, and myself, as usual, was tailing behind him. I worked from there in Perskine for a number of years, and but even at that time, there's a lot of harassment. I suppose had increased a lot at that time, and with the likes of the police pulling past it. We worked in Perskine, it was known as the bottom factory. The car park was along the road, and they could drive past every day and peep in. If they couldn't see in the workshop, they knew your car was there, so they thought about things were quiet today maybe.
Well, Tony was very, very popular out from work, and even out from the Republican movement. He was a very popular man around the bars and the dancers.
Oh, he would have been. What struck me about him, if he'd been into, say, like Boyle's Bar in Cap, or even Cookstown, didn't matter where he went, he could yarn and talk to an older person, a younger person, women, anything at all, lads. He seemed to gather a crowd around him at a bar. He wouldn't be like a loner sitting in the corner.
Hugh, one of the unique things about the men who died with Tony, they were all very, very close friends of his as well as comrades. For instance, Declan Arthurs would have done digging around your house.
Oh, I Declan, even Seamus Donnelly, which they were relatively young compared to Tony, but even out at night there, we'd always just, they'd always been together and hang about together, go, and that time there was no taxis as such, or they didn't really fancy coming out round Galloway shop area. But we'd have went to Knocknamo there, maybe 2, 3, 4 car load, we went every road together. And all these lads were socialised, and then, back within their, Republican movement the next, day.
So it wasn't uncommon at the likes of Knocknamo to look up along the bar and see Tony, Jerry O'Callaghan, Eugene Kelly all standing with a few pints?
Oh, they did not know. It was a regular sight every Saturday night, and including yourself there, Plunkett, different men. We had what we called the Galloway corner. It was, everybody from Galloway was at the bar at the left hand side, and then further up the steps, that is the Mariah area. So if any man, you had to see a man from Bamroy, you nipped away for a while and you landed up the stairs and you chatted to them, or they'd come down, and that's where they hung out in their part of it.
Tony took some time out late 1985. He took himself to Australia for a short while.
He did. Him and Conor McNulty and Paddy Michael from the Moy, they went to Australia for 6 months.
He still kept very much in contact with what was going on at home.
Oh, he did, because one of the things funny, we have a photograph of it, the Republican News, it had to be mailed out every week or whatever. He still got it and I read it every week. Back on it, both my ma and father, both families would have been strong, if you want to use the term, Republican families, and my father would have been involved a lot that time, early years, I suppose from civil rights up till later early 80s or late 70s, PDF, he was involved a lot in national graves, so even round home, round our house, even watching the election times there, my father would have been, you know, watching the results on television. There'd been a lot of people out and into the house, both canvassing, doing the electoral registers and stuff like that there. And I suppose then later on there'd been, the Republican movement would have been a fair bit about, you know, in later years too, about it, or earlier years.
The late 70s saw the escalation of the protest in Loughgall. Would that have an effect on Tony as well?
Well, it would, but like I've now later or learned now that Tony was involved in the Republican movement probably early 1980, just before the death of volunteer Martin Horseman, and he was involved in, at the time of Martin Horseman's death or funeral, wake and funeral, he had been involved in both the Guard of Honour inside the house and the colour party on the day of the funeral.
Being in New York and being away from home at that time, learning of Tony's death must have been particularly tough.
I spoke to Tony 3 nights before on the phone to home, and then the phone call come through to a flat we were staying in, belonging to a neighbour, Paul Nugent, whose father had died at home, and he had come home for a few days for the funeral, and we just stayed in the apartment there. And the phone call come through from Sean Nugent till Martin McYahey, and then Martin. I knew by the talk on the phone, I could hear Martin asking names or relating names, and I just knew there was something wrong. I was just waiting for Martin to come on the phone to, you know, to tell me. I could sense that, you know, there was a number of men killed, but what happened, as you know, I couldn't wait to get off the phone to hear what, you know, really the news was.
And in the minutes and hours after you heard the news, what was your main concern?
Well, it was the first thing I said, I have to get home here I spoke to the local minister, and when I rung home I was talking to Gach on the phone, and he just gave me a rough idea of what, you know, he didn't know what happened, but all I could think of was just, I want to get home to, you know, sort out, you know, things around the house and bits and pieces like that there. But I have to say that people off the area there in New York we were in, the news spread around, you know, right and quick, and all the lads got together and they landed to our apartment, and particularly Jerry Dolman, I was working for at the time over there, he organised a flight for me and Martin home. We had to get a standby flight the next afternoon.
That would have been a long flight home, Q.
It wasn't much, and I remember, funny enough, getting off the plane, just as I got off the plane in Dublin, the newspapers lying where they have, the stewardess have a wee table. And I lifted it and I think it was the Irish Independent or so many papers, and the headline was Bloodbath. And I took the paper with me just to read it, going through the lounge waiting to get, to get the lift up the road back home.
Who met you at Dublin Airport?
Sean Nugent and John Rafferty. They come down and picked me and Martin up.
John Rafferty would be a relation.
John would be his first cousin, yeah.
You would have been glad to at least seen familiar faces.
Well, it was good, and they were limited in what they knew about the actual operation or how the men died, but were more interested in what way things was going, funeral arrangements, or what was happening around home.
And again, could have been a long journey home to County Tyrone.
It was. We come up, funny enough, to the farm, and in Emmy Vale, there was an old woman, Sissy. She lived in the house that was on the farm, and we got tea there, and then I telephoned home to the house to see what we've got that length, because there's no mobiles at times, My mind my father saying to me, don't come across Loughgall, go down to what was known as Balloch Bridge. There's an unimproved road, and he says, get you walk across the border there, and John and Sean will drive around and lift you there. But of course we didn't do that. I thought it'd not be too bad, we'll chance it across Loughgall.
In the hours just before the funeral, what's your memories of that time?
Well, I suppose we were down early that morning, or down at the house, and the girls were sorting out bits to do with, prayers that had to be read at the chapel, and Cahill was sorting out all the bit of farming, all bits and pieces had to be done. And I remember myself had been talking with volunteer Seamus Woods that was looking after the colour party over the period of the week, them few days, and looking after the funeral. So we just, everybody was sort of knocking about, and there was a lot of people about, a lot of commotion going on, helicopters, police. They didn't come fair enough into the street, but they come in fair enough around the top of the yard, in the fields there.
Tony's would have been the first of the 4 local funerals, so it would have been some nervousness and apprehension about what was going to happen.
There was. Everybody was sort of worrying, or what was going to happen, or but it passed off peacefully enough. When they landed up to the chapel,
There was a very, very big interest from the press and reporters.
Well, being the first of the 4, and like they called Galway the heartland of East Tyrone, they were out to get the first coverage, and any show of strength or such, or guard of honour or whatever was there to be seen.
And there was a massive crowd there on Tony's final journey to Armagh.
There was. The lane was packed, and they carried him up from the street, up around to the top of the lane, over the lane. Both being at the front of the cortege, you couldn't really see back, but there were crowds were coming out of the fields, and as before they got out the lane, you could see the people jumping over the wire. They were coming out of the fields and just joining in behind. Tony had great faith, and he wore his miraculous medal, and even when we were at home there in the bathroom every morning, he had a wee prayer writ out. It was like a wee plastic thing, and he'd lift it every morning and he'd read it, just a short few words to himself. He's mentioned a lot of times, a lot of places, and we're still extremely proud of him, and always will be. Some good times, some bad times, and in recent times were bad times there. My father died 10 months ago, and we often picked out, and sometimes we're talking to her, we just wonder, what would he have been doing today? Would he have been married? Would he have a family? Had it been, just normal life? Tony's death was a tragic loss to the family, a tragic loss to the Republican movement.
I'm learning how to live without you, and I never thought I could, and even how to smile again, I never thought I would. and to cherish the heart's memories that can bring you back to life. Though some caress me gently and some cut me like a knife, can your soul be out there somewhere beyond the infinity of time? I guess you found some answers now. I'll have to wait for mine, till my light joins with yours one day, to shine through time and space, and one day fall in a distant age upon some stranger's face. But your light still shines. It's one small star to guide me and to help me hold back the dark. Your light still shining in my heart. Yes, your light's still shining in my heart.
January 1968. He was the fourth child of this family here, and he took his name. There was a fella, a friend of his, killed just the year before it, and we gave him Seamus because of his friend. And
Who was it?
Seamus Kane.
Oh, right.
The fella was Seamus Kane. So that's why we called him Seamus, and as well as that he was called for his grandfather, James Donnelly here. He was very lively.
He was prone to breaking bones a lot, remember?
That's right. He was prone to, I think he must have broken nearly all his bones, for he broke his shoulder bone, his big toe, his arm, his collarbone.
His thumb.
His thumb.
He broke in the door of the phone box in Capra.
That's right. I think if he fell at all, he was sure to break a bone. I think he must have had brittle bones, but I didn't really
He
have.
must have had brittle bones.
I don't know. He seemed to be that unfortunate just with himself.
Mm-hmm.
Seamus went to Galway School, to St. Joseph's School, until he was 11-year-old, and he was just getting very lively now. When he came till about 9 or 10, he was lively. Do you remember the time he was on the bus? He was a bit of a play actor, wasn't he?
And by the time that there's a bomb up the road, up at it must have been up about Michael James Keynes, or the bridge above Donny's Hill there. Had been blown up, and the bus instead of going up the up road, the bus used to come down from Cap and turn at bottom Donny's Hill. Do you remember?
Let it off.
And the bus instead used to have to come down the low road round past Downyack Crossroads and up past our lane here. And we were trying to get the bus driver to stop at the at our lane to drop us off. So the bus driver was a bit strict to the rules, stopped at the bus stop only. So we tried to force him a bit more to get him to come down this way, to let us off on the way back down again. He ended up past our lane, turned and made us get to the bus stop up at Donny's Hill.
He wouldn't let them off when he was going past.
He wouldn't let us off going past, and he wouldn't take us back down to the lane, which was like half a mile of walk. So this went on a few days, and we decided, me and Seamus was kind of talked among ourselves. We planned it would make it a bit difficult for him. So as soon as we got out of the bus up at Donny's Hill, we walked out in front of the bus, and we walked down the road in the middle of the road in front of the bus,
and the bus driver sat behind us blaring the horn, beeping the horn, and we walked on. We wouldn't let the bus past.
When he did the 11 plus, but he didn't pass it now, and he went on then to St Patrick's Intermediate in Dungannon. So he was very good now the first couple of years, and then they made him the class prefect, and that was a boost to him because that was his first time to be prefect. They must have thought him very good, but he started play acting on the bus again. He could plan fights and all the different of the day, but I think the part that I really enjoyed, he'd come home here in the evening and he would tell every word of it. And he would tell about, we were all brought up in front of Mr. So-and-so from the Armagh bus step, from the education board. And he'd say, Mommy, there's this wee man with a goat beard. And he says, I was killing myself laughing before ever I got the length of them at all. He interviewed them all. And then when he came my length, he asked me, who did I see carrying on? And he says, the people that were sitting down quiet, I named them. I said, the other one, that's where the deadlessness was in him. He told about the ones that were good on the bus. He said they were the ones that were carrying on. So there was a funny side to him. Well, he spent about 5 years, I'm sure, in the intermediate school, and then he did the entrance exam for the tech, and he passed it. And I just could not believe it when he came home and said, Ma, I'm going to do catering. I thought it was a big joke. He said, no, I'm interested, I'm going to do catering, but I had my own notions about him and the catering. But anyhow, he went to the tech anyway, and he started, and he was very serious about it, but I think it was crack at the same time he was after. He was very friendly with a few girls that were in his class, and I'm sure he was the comedian for them. Much fat or carbohydrates with very little fresh fruit and vegetables. If the menu is written in French, it should be translated into English for the public to understand. But that's only
very basic stuff. That I was only 8 when Seamus died, and my memories of Seamus would be very distant, but I do always remember him being a real laugher, a real joker, and carrying on with us. And he just adored us, the two wee ones in the house, myself and Colette. And he would be throwing us up in the air and catching us and twisting us around. And we'd be, remember you were saying to my mummy about it, we used to walk on his feet. Whenever
he'd walk around and hold you on his feet.
Yeah, I used to call me the Kittery Pup. And that photograph that we're looking at earlier was me sitting on his knee at Leo's wedding, and I was just looking up at him. I would have adored Seamus, the big brother. But as I say, I do remember different things, different wee slices of things that happened, but you know, they're only flashes really, you know, because it's so long ago and that. So.
He was very musical and could play great tunes, dance tunes and all that. And you know what he used to do in the morning time? When I'd be hurrying him out to go out to do work, I'd go down and I'd find him lying on his back in the bed and him playing, and his favourite air that he played was How Great Thou Art. He lay on his back in the bed playing How Great Thou Art.
Did you play it
himself? Playing it himself, lying on the bed. And you were to tell him to hurry up, there would be no hurry in him. It was just, he would wait till he played the last note of How Great Thou Art. And he'd set the banjo down and get out of his bed and get ready. So that's his banjo there. Indeed, Lucia's got a bit dusty.
It has.
It hasn't been
shows the lack of play that it's got. There's a string broken in there.
The string broke.
There it is. It would definitely need a bit of dust.
and he cycled the whole 400 miles, the whole length of Ireland. He cycled the whole thing on standing on the paddles. He couldn't reach the saddle. He couldn't reach the saddle of the bicycle, but it didn't stop him. He was mad to get away. He loved it. He loved getting away for the Easter week. We always went away on Easter week. And that's, remember that you know, Seamus, he never drank. Seamus never drank, and I think, you know what, that there was his first particular instance I remember of we were all everybody, we stopped at the shop this particular day, and we bought sweets and drinks and stuff like that, and the lads were all buying shandies and stuff, buying cans of shandy and stuff, and so he was only a cub, and he didn't know the difference, but he bought the shandy same as the rest of the boys, and down the road in the bicycle, and next thing he looked at the tin of shandy, and it says, "This contents contain 1% alcohol." And lo and behold, Seamus realised that this was alcoholic drink, and he was a probationer. He had his probationer pin or whatever at that age. Well, he probably had a probationer pin, but he was not drinking anyway. So he stopped the bicycle and he back to the shopkeeper, and he said to the shopkeeper, he says, "I didn't realise there was alcohol in this here." He said, "Could you change this for me?"
That's the praise, you see, the bank manager giving him the praise. That was for that particular cycle. They gave him a praise because he stood up to the drink.
My young age is probably, I suppose, any country lad, any farm lad growing up on a farm, he was mad about driving tractors, and I suppose he didn't get that much opportunity maybe here. I suppose, well, maybe more so we would go over every Saturday, me and him would go over every Saturday till Granny's, till Uncle, your home place, over in Loughgall, over to Pat's, and so Pat had no help, and he had a couple of majors, and we got a free reign of driving every.
That suited him.
Suited Pat, but it was great for us too, and especially Seamus. He loved to get on the tractor driving, and I suppose drawing in the hay and all sorts of jobs, gathering stones and driving the tractor through the fields, and that'll be every Saturday. That'll be our trip away every Saturday. We'd have to sneak away from here. We'd have to sneak away as soon as we get up. Get on the bicycles way over to Loughgall, over to Pat's, and then I suppose that after that, then as he went on, grew older, then he went to with my other uncle Tom, throwing the silage.
Used to draw silage for him, surely.
Draw silage for him, and I suppose
he wouldn't have been more than 15, 14 or 15.
14 or 15. We're all that's sort of age he started driving that time, you know. I remember one evening, in fact, it was the very first time that he was ever arrested. I remember he was coming, a real wet evening. Do you remember that?
That's
he was
right.
coming back from Legions or something. He finished the evening time. It was too wet or something, and he headed off walking home, and he came across a patrol of British soldiers, and they stopped him on the road. Remember they held him on the road?
Held him for 2 hours.
2 hours in the heavy rain.
Pouring on him.
Wouldn't let him go.
And after that, they put him into the back of an army truck and took him to Gulf Barracks.
At 15?
At 15 years
years
old.
of age, took him away.
Yeah, and then we didn't know that till that evening. The police phoned to say that he was in the barrack.
So you had to go down, had you?
We had to go down that night, and we were questioned about him too. They wouldn't believe he was so young.
They thought he was older,
But
did they?
they must have thought he was older, so he got out with it. He got out home with us again that night.
And do you remember that particular thing? The most amazing thing about that was when I was taken into Gough that day. Remember when you and Dan went down to see him, the interview, you sat in the interview with him, and they were asking him questions. They got there, and he sat up, never spoke to them, wouldn't speak to them. And you couldn't believe it. You didn't know why he wouldn't answer the question.
I couldn't believe it. I was cross looking at him sitting silent. I thought he should be defending himself. But he never answered.
Not one.
He was so determined.
Nobody.
An old age, like. No, I didn't like to see him coming. You'd hear the helicopter at night, and you would be. I used to have to tidy the house here at night, for I never knew when they're in the next morning.
Imagine tidying for them.
Imagine tidying for them boys, but I'd have felt embarrassed if the house hadn't been tidy when they'd arrived.
Remember they cracked the ceilings, Mummy?
They cracked the
went
ceilings.
up into the attic
right.
space and tramped over the top of all the roof, the upstairs, and all. We had to get them all repaired.
Yeah, and I was saying, "What are you looking here anyway? We're looking guns." I said, "What would I be doing with guns? Me, with a crowd of children around me. What would I be doing with guns?"
Aye, well, definitely the one thing that did worry Seamus about all them raids. Remember the guy came into the house. Remember with the soldiers.
Policeman.
Probably was he a policeman? He was, or you see man. He this guy he drew a detailed. Remember, he drew a detailed plan of the house.
Every room.
Every room in the house. Remember
Yes,
that every room in the house.
aye.
And he put it in and into Seamus's room. And remember in Seamus's particular room, he drew out the beds and the exact the heads that were shown in the bed as well, where Seamus lay and Michael lay. But remember, Seamus was always very, very worried about, because they said
They told him.
What they say?
They told him in Golf Barracks in an interview that they've come out. He's going to be shot
In his bed.
in his bed, and he was real worried.
He's worried that they would maybe do that, but I'd come in and maybe shoot Michael instead of him.
Michael instead. He was very worried about that. So he was. I remember well the week before Seamus died, that on the Wednesday night, Packy's sister was here and the daughter, and the helicopter came and it roared over the house here, and Seamus and Gerard O'Callaghan were in the kitchen, and I invited them to come into the room, but as usual they didn't have time. They went out to the car, they said they had to go, and they went out and they sat in the car, and the helicopter roaring over the house here. So that was on Wednesday, and on Thursday there was a lot of activity of helicopters again, but past no remarks, and Seamus didn't come home on Thursday night. So I brought the girls. Do you remember I brought you to elocution on a Friday evening? And when I dropped you off, I went up to the square to do some shopping, and all of a sudden the tanks, the army trucks started coming down the square from,
Right, I remember that.
from Castle Hill. And I remember counting them. There were 30 trucks came down that evening, and they turned down Church Street, and I think some of them went on down Scott Street. And I wondered what on earth, there was something really happened, but as usual I wasn't chatting to anybody.
I remember you going on and asking and querying had any of us seen Seamus, and myself and Martina, we had left him up the night before till Malachy Boyles, and that was the last any of us had seen him. I don't remember exactly what was said or anything when he was leaving, but I always remember that it was us two that were with him.
And
that
Martina
night.
says that no, but the evening before he went, that evening before he went to Malachy Boyles on was it Thursday? I says to him, Seamus, Sean Grimes came that evening to collect his insurance, and I says, tell him, I paid your insurance, Seamus. Oh, he says, did you? I says, I did. I says, just to be a conversation with him, I says, you'll have it sometime, Seamus, it'll all build up, and you'll be able to buy a house maybe when you get your insurance. He says, Ma, I'll never need a house. And that stuck in me all from that on. I wondered that he said that to me, and that was really the day before. And we came in, and at the table, he was sitting eating, and I don't know what the conversation came up about, but I said, Seamus, were you at your confession for Easter? Do you know, Ma? He says, I can't mind. Well, I says, you need a mind. I says, it's all right joking with me, but you don't joke with a man above. Wasn't that some conversation to have the evening before he died? I was sitting in the kitchen. I'm sure maybe I wasn't sitting there walking around, and Leo and Packy came through the back door, and I said, what's wrong? Did you hear any word about what happened tonight? And Packy says, it's not good now, we can't find Seamus anywhere, and we're driving about looking at him. And we all started panic and cry, and then the wee ones came out of bed, and they were vomiting and sick with the shock. It was terrible. And then a while after that, then Kevin Corrigan and Eamon Roberty and somebody else came in, and then the spur moment I says, well, the best thing we can do is get down on our knees and say the prayers for them. So they all go down their knees, and we all said the rosary. And it was just, we were all panic stricken and very sick. And
had they the news at that stage?
They came in and told us at that stage that Seamus was dead.
Particular Friday night, that Friday evening, I was in the house. Everybody else was away out, as you would normally go out to the pub on a Friday night, or out to the dance or whatever. But I was that particular Friday evening. I was in the house by myself. I remember clearly by myself, and I heard the news. I heard the news that an incident happened. There's been an ambush at Loughgall, and I remember thinking. It just struck me. I just thought about it. I had a slight funny feeling about it as well. And then I waited till a second report, and then I heard it was reported that there was army or police army, I think it was, that was killed. I think there was 8 dead or 9 dead or something, and they said that the sort of reported that it was the army.
Yes.
The army I think. So I was kind of relieved. Although I remember I decided sometime later on it wasn't too easy. I walked down the road down to the phone box down at in Church Road in London where I lived, and I made a phone call home, and Helen answered the phone, and I was asking her what did you hear the news, whatever, and she said there was someone happened, you know. And I said, and I did ask her, says, where's Seamus at? She said, I don't know where he is, I don't know how.
Oh, did you?
I did surely ask Seamus, where was Seamus, you know.
Mm-hmm.
But anyway, I kind of went home and kind of back to the house, and I went to bed, I suppose, later on, and about 5 or 6 o'clock in the morning, some of my friends, some of my mates came up to the room, and they said that you have to go and phone home. Apparently Leo had managed to contact the police, or somebody managed to contact the police in London, and they had relayed the message to the address, my address. We didn't have a telephone, so of course I get up and down the road to the phone, and I knew down the road that I was going to hear bad news. And Leo answered the phone whenever I rang. It was early Saturday morning. I'd know maybe 7 or 8 o'clock. Leo answered the phone, and he just started naming them one after the other, and I just could not believe it. Well, especially Seamus, I just couldn't believe it. You know, I was just hoping against all hopes that he wasn't one of them. You know. So he named them all off, and it just was a complete shock. And then you came on the phone. I was speaking to you, and you says, come on home immediately, you know, come on home. And I says, well, I'll have to, you know, it was very bad for him, so I said I'll have to make arrangements. I'll have to try and get home as soon as I could, you know. So back up to the flat and told the boys, and went from there.
They all came
home with you?
Didn't all come home with me that
Someone
time.
came home.
Patrick Gattes was actually there as well in London. He was staying quite local to me as well.
So did you get the same flight home?
Me and Patrick got the same flight home, yeah. The same flight home, and we were talking about the story on the plane about Sylvie Keynes, the story about apparently somebody had made a phone call. Apparently, and afterwards, it gathered that it was the police had made a phone call to Sylvie Keynes' neighbour. I remember Sylvie's up the road that there was a
claiming to be Seamus, wasn't it?
Was it claiming to be Seamus?
Acting Seamus.
Aye. Saying you know what I mean, and all this. I can't remember exactly, but they were.
What they say?
They were going over the same sayings as he would have said. This is
I'm
Seamus.
in the wee house beside the Humpback Bridge. Come and get me. And he said in his tone of voice as if he was stuttering.
To give you
don't be stupid. Do you remember?
Don't be stupid.
They didn't get me.
They didn't get me.
That's
Don't be
right.
stupid. They didn't get me. That was it.
I remember me and Patrick talking about that in the plane, and
yeah,
you're still hoping against hope that.
Like, I was only 8 whenever Seamus was killed, but that day that he was killed, I remembered so clearly. I remember we'd been in Dungannon that day, and we came out the road, and you'd been quizzing about where Seamus was, and I remember myself and Colette out playing outside and been in, and I remember Christy Mallon and Dermot Boyle arriving to our house, and a news flash came on, and I remember Daddy getting very stressed, and I can remember as a child you couldn't understand why or what he was getting so bothered about. 8 IRA men were supposedly shot in Loughgall, and I can remember we were ushered away off to bed early, myself and Colette, and I can remember it was May and it was lovely weather and it was still bright outside, and we would have been put to bed particularly early this evening because you were away, Mummy. Yeah, you were away visiting you and Granny, and I don't remember anything after that, only Colette wakening me and saying waken. I think there's something wrong, and myself, I can remember being deep in sleep and the two of us getting out of our bed and going up and hearing all this commotion and going up the hall, and I remember opening the door and Helen was sitting up on the worktop and she was crying, and everybody was in a real state, and you were home at this stage, so that must have been about 12 or 1 o'clock, and I can remember the fear and praying just that it wasn't Seamus, you know, that he wasn't the one, you know, he wasn't actually killed. But I think that we realised that he was. And I can remember we would have always loved to get up to Maisie Corrigan's house, and I can remember that night you suggesting that we go up and stay in Maisie's. And I would have been younger than Colette. I thought this was still great that I was getting to go up to Maisie Corrigan's to stay overnight. But Colette, she was refusing to go. She was very, very sick. But I went on up myself. And I can remember, although I knew that there was something wrong, and I can remember not even being able to sleep that night. And waking up the next morning and feeling sick and knowing that there was something really wrong. And I can remember it seemed to take a lifetime for Maisie to get herself organised to bring me down, bring me home. And it was just a big shock, a big upheaval.
She probably was taking her time.
Yeah, she was probably purposely doing it, and I can remember making me breakfast and all the rest, and all I wanted to do was get home. I can remember all the commotion of the Brits and the police and all around here, and
all around the
crowds and that, and I think maybe it was just that it went on so long, you know, but it was very sort of stressful at the time.
God, you always listen to sincere prayers. We have celebrated the funeral rite of our brothers, and now we ask you to grant them a share in that blessed reward which you have prepared for all the saints. Through Christ. Amen. Let us pray for the bereaved. O Lord Jesus Christ, the Lord of all consolation, who were moved to tears at the grave of Lazarus, look now with compassion on your servants who are sorely grieved.
Thank you. The morn's breaking bright and fair, the lark sang in the sky. When the maid she bound her golden hair with a blind glance in her eye, for who beyond the gay green wood was waiting her with joy? Oh, who gallant Renardy on the mountains of Pomeroy, full often in the dawning hour, full oft in twilight.
Eugene was the second eldest of 7 of us, and although Pierce was the oldest, and Pierce was mentally and physically handicapped after taking meningitis for 6 months, Eugene could have been regarded probably as the eldest in the house and looked upon as the eldest by the younger members. But that would have been our earliest memories of him, looking up to him as a father figure and the eldest in the house. He was a serious worker, like he just showed an appetite for work beyond his years. I'm sure he had all his money in his circulation, but he had been a quick man to share it out with friends and family, and the value of it never really meant much to him. At a very young age, he bought a 10-speed racer, probably out of the savings, so getting the spuds from the Brannigans, and he would have done the Easter cycles with Father Johnson from Donachmore with the Tyrone freewheelers, and cycled all over Ireland. He done this on 3 or 4 different years.
He was very, very interested in music as well, even at a
Yes,
young age.
his LPs records still here from Bob Dylan and Chris Gustavson and a few other American country stars, and also Christian Muir, was a big fan of Christian Muir.
Dear love, she said, I'm so afraid for the foeman's force and you. They've tracked you in the lowlands plain and all the valley through. My kinsmen frown when you are named, your life they would destroy. Beware, they say, of Renardy on the mountains of Pomeroy. Fear not, he cried, my love. Fear not the foe for me. No change shall fall on every.
He would have had his test right away at 17, and I'm sure he had a car on the road within a week.
And it was reflective, the first big journey that he did.
I can remember he had an Avenger car, a red one with a black roof, and we have photographs here in the house of him taking my mother down to Muckamore and County Antrim to see Pierce and take him up home here for the weekend.
The late 1970s and into the early 80s, the prison protest became a very central part of Eugene's life.
Yes, I'd say the 81 hunger strike had a big bearing on his life, as it did for a lot of people in the community, most people, especially the death of Martin Hurston hunger strike. That changed a lot of people's lives, I think, around here.
That would have been around the time that Eugene joined the Irish Republican Army.
I'd well say so. He'd have joined the IRA around about that time.
And his circle of friends would have begun to centre around the Republican circles, is that correct?
Very much so, yeah.
He became particularly close to a few people.
I think right up until the last, there was a very special bond between himself and Big Tony. Although they wouldn't have grew up together at a young age or went to school together, Tony and himself was very, very great. Well, there was a helicopter one time, it must have been
around the spring, start of the spring, and the grass was fairly long in the garden, and this helicopter was about all day and was hovering overhead, and Eugene starts to cut the grass in the lawn, and before long he goes into the middle of the garden and cuts out IRA in the middle of the grass, and we were wondering what he was at, this mad attack in the middle of the garden, but it wasn't long afterwards we realised what he had done.
There are many people out there in the community today who are Irish language enthusiasts, but in the early 80s Eugene done his own bit for the Irish language.
One time he just took this notion of removing the stop signs around the local crossroads here, over Staffords and down at Paul Lahern's and Gelby, and took them off, and with the help of an artist he painted them all in Irish stad and then fitted them back on again.
So anybody that hadn't fluent Gaelic would have been lost for a day or two.
Well, that's it.
Wonder did it cause any accidents?
Hopefully not.
And rosy red, and the tumbling towers fall. But the mist came down, and the tempest roared, and all around destroyed, and a pale round bright met remedy on the mountains of power on. An outlawed man in a land forlorn, he scorned to turn and fly, but he kept the cause of freedom safe upon the mountain high.
He was buried not more next to my grandmother, beside my grandmother. They had a close bond. She obviously left him the house, 89 Loughgall Road here, which he renovated, so that's where he's buried.
Taking him out that morning was a particularly tough morning.
It was, as I say, like, you know, your memories of the funeral vague enough, but I suppose it was devastating, very sad that morning, and any funeral is sad, but when you look back at it 20 years later, you say for a young man at 25 he achieved a lot in a short life, and he shared a lot. He was a great brother. He's always there, very much as a father figure to us all. He was always the light in my mother's eyes. He was very dedicated and committed to looking after Pierce and taking him home and whatnot. But we're also very proud as a volunteer. Proud that the girls accepted the Shakera down in Dublin.
Still don't really, you know.
No, it's very hard. You just all bottle it all up.
But so many good memories, you know. He was so good.
Eugene was just like a fatherly figure in our house. Like we all looked up to him, didn't we?
We did.
We depended on him for so much.
I know, he had the cars. He took us everywhere. Learnt us to drive. You know, took us to dances.
I know, and we were always like, can we get the car? Can we get the car the night? And you had it on everything during the day to get the car.
I know, we spoilt him, didn't we? Oh God. I remember one time, Eugene was working with Daddy at Tommy John McGee's house. I think Eugene was maybe about a first year, you know, or maybe less. And he was cleaning out the mixer at the end of the day, and he put me into the mixer. And he threw this water and stuff in, and oh, I was just soaked in black stuff. And it was all a big laugh, no matter what he'd done. He really did take a hand out of us. Like, it was like the time Nolene was ready to go out, dressed and ready to go out. And she was all standing, all glamorous to go out through the front door, and Eugene put her under the shower in the bathroom, like he was her, or he would have rubbed his hands through her hair.
No, I can't remember back.
He was always picking, you know, him and Nolene were very, very close.
No, but the whole country, you know, what it called for Eugene. Remember the card games we used to have on a Sunday? And all the, you know, the cousins, probably would have been what, 16, 17, 18 around that time.
And Tony Donnelly would have been down, and Martin Kelly. And
but I remember I used to play, and you know, Eugene would have, like, I would have been betting away at the money, and of course, like, I would have always lost my money, and he had always kept subbing you, you know, to keep you playing.
He was always a great man for getting a sub off you. Oh no,
that's right. Now you'd have given him, you know, you'd have given him your money. You know, if it was your last £20 or whatever, you'd have given it to him.
I know. I remember one, I think it was Easter, and Patricia Kelly and myself went into Malachy Boyle's. We were going out for the night, and Eugene had been in for quite a few hours, and he had run out of money. And we give him the money to go out, and we stayed in, you know, because even, like, you know, the cousins loved him too, like, you know, like Patricia.
Do you remember when he renovated Granny's house? And I remember labouring till him, like, you'd have been carrying cement into him and blocks and all, and you're thinking, like, sure, who else would have been doing it?
Yeah.
You know, Eugene's death really broke Mummy and Daddy. It broke all our hearts, but, like, you know, Daddy and Mummy never got over that, you know. And, like, for years and years, you know, nobody talked about him. You know, you just all battled it up inside, and you felt you couldn't talk about it, or you didn't know who to talk till. You were like, we never even talked about it. You know, as sisters, we never talked about the grief, did we?
It was such a shock. You know, we didn't realise. I suppose we were naive too. Like we knew, I suppose, he was in the IRA, but we didn't know enough about it to really understand that he was really in it. Like, you know. And then when it happened, it was just...
I remember years ago I would have spoke to a priest. We would have had a school retreat. And I spoke to a priest, you know, I told him that I was aware that my brother was in the IRA, and, you know, that I was worried about him. And he had said to me, you know, well, all you can do is pray for him, you know, pray for his safety.
Yeah.
But I remember that night, that Friday, the 8th of May, and I was in the fort. And suppose nowadays you would have been contacted right away with mobile phones, but that night Mummy had to wait till every one of us came home, one after the other. And I remember just coming up the hill before you came to our house, and you just knew, because the sky was lit up, and I just knew at that stage, you know, God, Eugene's dead. And I remember pulling up onto the street, and a neighbour had went round, opened the door, and he says to me, you know, I went to run into the house, and he says to me, Geraldine, wait. And he says, I says, Eugene's dead. And he says, who's told you? And I says, a priest told me that years ago.
We never talked to Eugene about the IRA. Eugene was very, very private in that, you know, sort of area of his life. Like, you know, he was a dedicated soldier. Like, he didn't talk about it. And, you know, and nothing was
his personal beliefs.
He
was really a family.
He kept it completely to himself. But I do think he did talk to Mummy about it, because I know, like, Brian and Eugene, like, were up, and Mummy's seen many a thing, you know, with. But then again, like, Brian would have been a very private person too, and a very ordinary person, just like Eugene.
Well, it's strange too, because at that time, you know, you'd have known, you know, briefly that he was involved, but you know, nobody really prepared families for what can happen. You know, for the devastating effects that it can have, or Eugene's death, and you know, the house sort of been taken over. You know, our home just, you know, overnight wasn't ours. You know, and even that whole grieving process. You know, you were in the eyes of the camera all the time. You couldn't really, you had no personal time to grieve, had you?
I know, and I suppose, like, we didn't have a paramilitary funeral, and that was Mummy's decision. And I suppose Mummy thought she wanted to protect us from the RUC and the soldiers and the harassment that Eugene went through, because, like, we did suffer on the roads. We were held up from work and never got anywhere in time because of this, because we were Eugene's sister, or we were driving Eugene's car, and it, you know, and like, you know, Mummy probably thought, well, I have to protect my girls, and Gabriel, like Gabriel was getting a lot of harassment. At the time, it was very hard for us to bury Eugene like that, and you know, the whole country looking on and knowing, you know, that maybe this was terrible for the IRA, for one of their members to be buried like this, and you know, you always felt that people were watching you and looking, and you know.
But you know, I remember at that time Mummy saying to you know, that Eugene had give his life. You know, he'd give everything. You know, the ultimate sacrifice for the cause. And the way Mummy looked at it then was, you know, let me have him now in death. Let me bury him. You know, here. You know, this is the chapel Mummy always would have went to. Like, Mummy would never have went to Galbly Mass. You know, even, you know, like Daddy would always went to Galbly Mass, but, you know, Mummy would always, you know, come here. You know, and now you sort of, you're glad Eugene's buried here. And, you know, Daddy had spent a lot of time with Eugene, you know, his father, his work comrade. And, you know, my father would have been a very personal, quiet man. And, you know, he probably confided in Eugene a lot more than the rest of the family, and a better bond there. But I think Eugene's death just probably ripped a hole in my father as well. Like, Daddy never spoke about Eugene. And you know, when people would have come into our house and they would have brought Eugene's name up, Daddy would have just slipped out the back door, remember that? And even Graveyard Sunday for years, you know, like Daddy would only have come up to this grave once a year. And it would be on there, like, you know, Mummy would have had a plead with him to come to the Graveyard Sunday. It took so much out of Daddy to come here. Remember that when
he couldn't come to the grave, he just...
You know, and it was just a real torture. Like, he had to come up here and looked at the grave and walked away again. You know, Daddy just couldn't deal with Eugene's death. I remember when I went back to work after, you know, Daddy's death, and the man I work with had said that just, you know, as Daddy's coffin was been, you know, lowered into the ground, that there was just like a rustling of leaves came down here, and he was saying it was, you know, it was lovely, you know, the way that just, you know,
it was like a presence.
Aye, just like a presence, that happiness was there again, that the two of them were together.
And a pale round bride met remedy on the mountains of Pomeroy. An outlawed man in a land forlorn, he scorned to turn and fly, but he kept the cause of freedom safe upon the mountain high.
I'll start here at the beginning, when Paddy and myself got married. And we got married in Killeen on the 5th of June 1961. And we lived here, been living here since. So we had 6 children, and Mary being the eldest. And then we had 5 boys. Paul was the eldest boy, and then Brian. And Declan, he was the 4th born. So, and Patrick and Dominic. So Declan was born on the 28th of October, 65. Cross Cavanagh School was closing. And there was this photographer coming from the Observer, from the local newspaper. And they were coming to take a photograph of the last day at Cross-Cavanagh School. And I thought, well, Declan wasn't the age for starting, but he was going to start in the new school in Galway. And I thought, well, I'm going to send him on and get his wee photo took, which I did do. And he was in the front row of the photograph that was taken at Galway on that day at Cross-Cavanagh, the closing of the Cross-Cavanagh School. And he went on, he hadn't much interest in books. His great interest and love was driving. Didn't matter what he loved driving. And as it so happened, he started off with his daddy.
Close family unit. We went to school together, and Paul sort of made the path for us because he was the oldest, and he made the way for us. So by the time I got to school, Paul had, tell us the ropes, and then I went, and then Declan came behind us. But all of us together, growing up, we're always very close. If I had £1, they had £1. If I had none, then they give me, vice versa. And Declan was into machinery and diggers and oil and dirt, and he used to come in, he'd be black from head to toe, and that didn't bother him. He loved that sort of lifestyle. And I remember one day, I remember the political end of it in 1980. We went to the Moy till a torchlight procession. It was the first hunger strike, and there was me and him and a group of our young lads, it's the Gormleys, and that we all went to the Moy. It was a torchlight procession with these bits of laths with bean tins and holes in the sides and firelighters in them. I thought this was a great adventure, walking up the street, this police and riot gear and all the rest. That didn't really perturb us much, but we I remember standing that night and we're listening to speeches, but Mrs. McKierney got up and she talked about the men on hunger strike, and she talked about her son Tommy, who was on hunger strike, and she begged the crowd to help and support that their son wouldn't die in vain, and that there's 5 demands be got. And the emotional appeal that she gave that night was the last memory in my head, and Declan's as well, because probably sparked something inside us. This man was in a hitch black cell, and there we were, young and free, but we were very young at that stage, only 16 and 15. And I remember coming home that night, and we took the sticks home with us and the bean tins, and we come up the lane, and we let them come up the lane. We let a couple of wee bit of lighters left, and we let them. And we're walking up the lane with these 2 things. Suppose if Mummy had looked out through the window, she probably thought it was a Ku Klux Klan coming or something. And these 2 boys coming up the lane, but we're just young and innocent. But I'd say at that stage, that early stage, it had sparked something inside us to do something about the situation. So we got involved, and we got involved in the hunger strikes. We got involved in all sorts of wee protests of writing, support the hunger strikers on the roads, and painting footpaths and putting up flags, and just generally getting involved. And I remember going to anti-hate block committees and all the rest. Just stand there listening. You weren't fit to articulate or say anything, but you were fit to listen. And I think that's where a lot of things started, and then it was a snowball effect from there, and how our lives were panned out.
wee pig crocks down the back, and I always minded that he made a wee bicycle for me, and I'll never forget that. Like, and the thing Declan, he always used his hands. He always was great with his hand, and he made what I'm sitting on here at school, so he did. And he was perfect with his hand, and then he got up and then he got into the diggers, and he kept it lit from there. But Declan always, he always was very thoughtful and very kind as well. You know, we never left you out. Like I seen there, like the last place where I seen Declan before he was killed was Kelly's Inn, like, and I mean the first night I went to it, he always stayed with me, like, you know, he never left you out, like, in a crowd or anything like that, like, he was always very, very thoughtful. But that's my first memory of Declan, was the bicycle, and then it built up from there, and the diggers and that. Like, I mean, Daddy learned him how to dig, and I was sitting in beside him, and I was about 7, and no, it was a shaky ride on a digger, I can tell you. But he soon come on to it, so he did.
He first went to England. He drove a lorry for Cormac MacDonald, and I think he stopped off in Liverpool. But of course the police was waiting on him at Liverpool and took him in for question. And I kept ringing Cormac to see if he had arrived, but he hadn't got no word about him. But then the solicitor then rang me to say that he was been held in wherever in England, and he was released the next morning. He was driving this lorry, and on the front of it anyway, it was number 10. So he was called Downing Street, number 10 Downing Street. So he wasn't very happy about that, but that's how it was.
Throughout the 80s, especially the mid-80s, in around 84, 85, Declan became heavily involved, and he became more active. And in doing so, he became more and more and more on the spotlight of the enemy forces. And it was just a constant harassment. The I'd say surveillance was 24/7. Every time he was seen on the roads by the police, he was there torn and chase him and stop him, pull the car apart, search it. UDR, see him every time they stopped it, would be for 1, 2, 3 hours. If they stopped us anywhere near Auchnacolley or Ballygolly around that vicinity, it was the Auchnacolley Search Centre, maybe Hill and Auchnacolley Search Centre for 3 and 4 hours at a time. Then the arrests, you know, the golf parks, the 7 days happened. I remember the first morning he was arrested, it was in, I think it was in 1985. And we sort of bait them to it because we started work early that morning and we were driving down the lane, it was about 6:45. And the posse was late in coming, they come up the lane and met us in the lane, it was about 7 or 8 car load of DMSU. And they all jumped out of the car and they run over and they grabbed hold of Declan and says, "You've been arrested under Section 12 against the Offences Against the State Act." And I remember turning around and said to him, I says, "Say nothing to them bastards." And he turned around and I remember him looking back at me and smiling, he says, "Don't you worry about me." So you know, when he done his 7 days, that was his first 7 days, and he came out and I says, "Well, what do you think?" He says, "Not a ball." And the only thing I missed, he says, was a cigarette. Because he did the man for smoking. Me and him lay in one bed together. We'd get up about 7 o'clock every morning, and the first thing that Declan would do was put his cigarette in his mouth and light it. I couldn't understand this because I smoked at the time too, but I couldn't smoke till 1 o'clock in the day. But he'd have to have a fag going 24/7, where he'd smoke 65s a day. But the rest became more and more and more intense. In 1986, on the Christmas of 86, he was arrested on the 20th of December, and he was released on the 2nd of January, and he was rearrested again on the 4th of January, and he was released on the 11th. He was let out and he was rearrested again on the 14th and let out on the 20th. So inside that month, like, he only spent 3 or 4 days outside. And whenever he was he was caught. He was caught in the middle of an operation, and he got away, and he went on the run then in February 87. So he did, and he stayed away on the run then until he was actually killed at Loughgall. But he stayed in Monaghan with the local unit in Monaghan, and he operated along the Monaghan-Tyrone border. And whenever the boys asked him to come in to do any operation, Declan was only too willing to go. And he volunteered to serve us right away. What can you say? He was a fully committed, dedicated volunteer of Uglan Ahern.
The first memory I have now of that night, at 10:30 the news came across that there were 10 or 12 people killed at Loughgall. They were caught up in a bomb, believed to be soldiers, British establishment anyway. And I thought about it anyway, and later on then, Paddy was away, he wasn't home at that time, he was working. He was working along with Seamus Brannigan, and him and Seamus went over to Tally's for a pint. And then I was making ready for a wedding that we were going to the next morning. Rosanna and Mick Donnelly's daughter, Katrina, was getting married in Galway, and the wedding was at 11 o'clock. And the reception was being held in Tally's. So apparently that was the first wedding that was taking place in Tally's upstairs in the big lounge. Paddy got home anyways around about 11, half 11 on that night, on the Friday night. And we were going to go to bed early, and I said to Paddy, do you know, we'll wait up and we'll listen to the news at 1 o'clock. We'll hear the news at 1, which we did do. And it was a completely different story. They said that there was 8 men, 8 volunteers, IRA men, caught up in a bomb in Loughgall, and 1 civilian believed to be. And they were from the South Tyrone area. And I says to Paddy, where's that South Tyrone? Oh, God knows, he says, Amelia will probably know every one of them. So we went on ahead anyway to bed, and the next thing we heard a car coming onto the street and leaving again at that. And I said to Paddy, that's likely the Irish police, because there's nothing new for them to come onto our street and go off again. And about 5 minutes later, there came 2 cars onto the street, and a lot of closing the doors and what have you activity. So the doorbell rang anyway, and I got up out of bed, and I said, who's that? And they said, it's Kevin Corrigan here, Amelia. And I got bad news. We had to go then, somebody had to go to the morgue to identify Declan. And Frankie Rafferty's solicitor took it upon himself to go. Well, he offered to go, and I don't think any of the rest of the family was in any fit state to go to the morgue. We didn't want to go at all. But when we went to the morgue, it was, you just thought of Declan as he was, but it wasn't. It was different. Wee face altogether, not the wee pretty face that I had last seen on one of the days I went to visit him. And it was bedlam from there on. Not knowing when you were getting him home, and the actual funeral itself, the police they took over the whole of the car park at Tally's, with the result that none of the families or friends were able to, they hadn't a space to park a car or thing, and there was crowds. Where Declan's remains moved from the house here, went up to the head of the line and turned right and met up then with Seamus, and their wee coffins were carried from the priest's house right over to the chapel, and the crowds were very big, but the police there were all in riot gear. They expected big trouble, but thanks be to God that didn't happen. Everybody was there, and it was a dignified funeral and well attended, and we appreciated that very much, for it gave the family support. But Declan, we are very, very proud of him, and we wonder what he had been at if he had been alive today. I would say he'd have been married and a couple of wee children anyway, and he'd have been hopefully on his digger. He died on the digger. He drove the digger into Loughgall on the 8th of May. And his wee photograph that I seen was with his wee hand opened and the lighter in his hand. He had no gun on him. And he nearly got away, because he got over the gate, and the priest that anointed them at the time was a Father Devlin. And he told me on a couple of nights after we went down to visit this Father Devlin, and he said how he got over that gate, it was unreal, the height to how he got over it. But I suppose he heard the shooting and knew what was at stake, so he was running to save his wee life, wasn't he?
I'd gone to live in San Francisco in September 1986, me and Paula Quinn, who were married from Dungannon, whose brother was also killed in active service in 1973, when he was 16 years of age. So we went out till San Francisco. I took a year out, and I remember that evening of Loughgall 8th of May, I was driving downtown city centre. On a Friday I'd go and pick Paul up from our work, and we'd go to an Italian restaurant down in Geary, down in downtown San Francisco. And I remember us driving down till Castro, and I remember the radio in the car was on, but I tuned it until BBC World Service. And next thing, this bulletin came on that there was a gun and bomb attack on a police station in Northern Ireland, and that in a pursuing gun battle for half an hour there's believed to be several civilian casualties. And I says to myself, that's not good, because the people wouldn't stay about for half an hour, because the security forces been on top of them inside minutes. So I knew something was seriously wrong, and I had a bad feeling. And I remember lifting Paula and saying to Paula, I'm only after hearing that on the radio, and I have a bad feeling, I don't think. She says, well, we'll go and get something to eat and we'll go home, and we'll ring home then. That time there was no mobile phones or nothing like that, and that time had probably been 1 o'clock in the morning, because the time difference and all the rest. So we went and got something to eat, and I was on the edge. I said there's something wrong, and so we left early and went home and went up to the apartment and opened the door, and I knew the apartment was packed, and I says, something's not good. And my next door neighbour was Marie Nugent. She was staying in the flat above. She came out the door and she says, Brian, it's not good. And she told me the news, and she says there was 8 of them, and I could say, I says to her, I could nearly name who the 8 were. And at that stage, all my thoughts was getting home. So we went and we stayed up all night, and that night all the Irish community in San Francisco came round to the apartment. There was the Coltons from Kildress, and there was Paul McKeon, there's Rika man came round, and anything they could do, it was great help. But we went to the airport the next morning. We got a flight from San Francisco to New York, and then we got on a boarded a flight from New York till London. But 3/4 away, 3/4 an hour, and the flight out, the pilot, he said that we have reported engine trouble and we'll have to return to New York. I was, Jesus. Not again. So we're going down to New York, and we're landing into New York, and we go down the runway, and I looked out the window of the plane, and the engine of the plane was on fire, and ambulances was flying up the long side of it, and the fire brigade. I says, I'm never going to get home at all. But we landed anyway, and they took it off the plane. It was 3 or 4 hour delay took the luggage off that plane and got a new plane and refueled it and everything else. Then we were back on again. So that was us. We flew into London. And I remember flying into London and go down the thing. We go down off into the passport control, and the next thing I was arrested, and they took me into this wee room, and there was this boy with a big, he was a man in his 60s, highfalutin voice. He told me to go home and bury my brother, that if I didn't I'd be going on a body bag. So that was the reception I got in London. They held me there for 20 minutes, and next thing we board the flight back to Belfast. Into Belfast, and again at the reception I had the CID and the special branch, and one of them was a notorious figure, Mr. Murray, and he told me the same. He says, get you your brother buried or go back to America, or else you'll be in a body bag. He says, I'll leave you like your brother. And I says, that'll do. I never spoke to him, but I said him in my own mind, I says, that'll do. And went out, and I remember coming home. Edmund Quinn of Primary, Paula's uncle, lived with us at the airport, and brother-in-law Sean Keenan. I remember coming home, and there was the bottom of the lane was just, you know, there's men directing traffic, and there's cars in the fields. It was just, place was packed. And I remember going up the lane and going into the street, and with that eerie silence, you know, everybody was quiet. I just got into the room, and Mummy and Daddy and all the families in the room bar Paul. He was in Australia. Unfortunately, he couldn't be contacted. For he went. That began on a night. He went to the Outback. On his national radio and all the rest. He couldn't be contacted to the Monday or Tuesday. But we were all in the room, and there Declan was in the coffin. And I remember speaking to him a week before he was killed. And I says to him, listen, I says, I'm going home in a couple of months here. Why don't you come out? And he says to me, yeah, I'm going to Dublin, he says. I'll leave it that.
Many, many, many happy days. Great days. And they keep us going. Those good old memories.
Reflect on 20 years. Tomorrow, 8th of May, Casey's going to share a prayer with Adams. And I remember Jerry speaking, and Jim Lehner's giving the oration at Jim Lehner's funeral, and he says that Loughgall will become a tombstone for the British in years to come. Maybe it has, hopefully it has, and hopefully it is. The anvil round the Brits' neck that they finally, their departing in Irish unity is hopefully only years away. I remember before I got out of jail in 2000, an SAS man was on the radio being interviewed, and he talked about, he was asked about Loughgall in his military context, and was it a victory for them? He said in militaristic terms it was, but that in the following intervening year there was double the amount of military casualties lost, double the amount of bombings, and double the amount of shootings. I think East Tyrone Brigade, the IRA got stronger and grew bigger and bigger, and even up until the final days of the ceasefire, East Tyrone was one of the main areas that the Brits feared, that they couldn't come in and couldn't drive these roads unless they used helicopter support and everything else. Because back then nobody had nothing. All you had was your dignity and your pride, and you carried it on through. And that's what these lads died for. Died for their country, died for their neighbours. They died that their children wouldn't have to go through what we went through.
I'd like to ask now for any wreaths or family tributes to be laid on the grave of Jim Lena.
Thank you, Finn. And thanks to everybody. Such an enormous crowd that's turned up here today. Porrick, if you could see them, would be very, very proud. I don't know what to say. Just that, as Finn has said, those fellas who gave so much has achieved so much, and we don't appreciate what they did achieve. They have made this country wonderful. I'm not very good at talking, but I want again to thank everybody, and I sincerely mean that. It's most kind of you all to turn up here today, and I know Porrick will be very proud of you. I hope he's watching you, so goodbye.
that somewhere down the line, some in years to come, we'll be able to talk about it a bit more openly and a bit easier. At the minute, I say, even after 20 years, it's still fairly raw. So anyway, I have some great memories of Eugene, some sad ones.
Those who would have been too young to have known Tony. We also need to remember that many, many more men and women played their part. As a family, we would like to take this opportunity to thank all those people who helped Tony and his comrades over the years. Tony knew only too well that the IRA needed the support of the people, and the support in this area was very good. We're also very honoured that the local Sinn Féin have named their common after Tony. And we're also honoured that there's been a number of children named after Tony, Tony McVeigh and Tony Hughes, as well as our own family.
In this county, and in 5 others, cut off from the rest of the country, reduced to second-class citizenship. And I can recall a story. I remember when I was about 13 or 14, and it says something about our state of mind and the condition to which we had been reduced. I can recall a man, Malachy McNally, selling the United Irishman in Castle Street in Belfast around 1967, 1968. And the RUC came out of Queen Street Barracks and beat him black and blue in front of hundreds of people, hundreds of Catholics, hundreds of nationalists going about their business. And we put our heads down. The shirt was trailed off his back and he was brought in and arrested. And you contrast that mentality with what was to happen, for example, in 1981, when the hunger strike transformed our community.
We were attacked at least twice. Also at Mahon Road in Portadown, we talked about the task and coordination groups which organised and managed the British forces at Loughgall. That was murdered by an IRA attack around the same time and came very close to wiping out. The task and coordination group was actually sitting in a meeting when 11 mortars were fired at them. By the time of the IRA ceasefire in August 1994, the IRAC's Tyrone Brigade had written a chapter. This was a deliberate part of counter-insurgency strategy in order to more effectively manage and coordinate police, army, intelligence operations. The British Army maintained a full operational presence in a number of joint or operational bases with the IUC throughout the north, as well as maintaining a series of garrison and operational bases within their sole control.
volunteers that I knew, the leadership. I didn't know most of the lads from Loughgall, but I knew that they would have done their best too and paid for it with their lives. The army did its best. Some people might think that it wasn't good enough. Well, you can only do your best. And at some point, the army leadership knew that we had taken it as far as we could take it. And that we had to find another way, a way that would give our people dignity and a vision. And we found that way. And I believe that the way that was chosen will prove to be right.
I've sung so many songs of fallen heroes, and I really thought that I had said it all. But if a song can fill our hearts and raise our spirits, then we'll sing about our martyrs at Loughgall. Will the Irish nation bowed its head in sorrow at sadness that this country had seldom known? For Monaghan had lost a gallant soldier with 7 volunteers from East Tyrone. Oh England, do you really think it's over? If you do, you're gonna have to kill us all. For until you take your gunmen out of Ireland, we'll make them rue the blood spilled at Loughgall. It was on a warm and misty Friday evening, a scent of apple blossom filled the air. That village street seemed quiet and deserted, but the SAS were watching everywhere. The digger bomb had only reached its target when the trap was sprung and gunfire filled the air. Maggie Thatcher did not want any prisoners. Should they kill her, orders were quite clear. Oh England, do you really think it's over? If you do, you're gonna have to kill us all. For until you take your murderers out of Ireland, we will make them rue the blood spilled at Loughgall.
Will give new life to our mortal bodies through His Spirit living in us. Alleluia. In Armagh, ours in Vic, ours in Spirit need. Amen. The grace of our risen Lord and Saviour Jesus Christ, the love of God, and the communion of the Holy Spirit be with you all.
First reading, a reading from the book of Ecclesiastes. There is a time for everything, and a season for every activity under heaven. A time to be born, and a time to die. A time to plant, and a time to uproot. A time to kill, and a time to heal. A time to tear down, and a time to build. A time to weep, and a time to laugh. A time to mourn, and a time to dance. A time to scatter stones, and a time to gather them. A time to embrace, and a time to refrain. A time to search, and a time to give up. A time to keep, and a time to throw away. A time to tear, and a time to mend. A time to be silent, and a time to speak. A time to hate, and a time to love. A time for war, and a time for peace. This is the word of the Lord. That's the story of the song. Response: the Lord is my shepherd, there is nothing I shall want. The Lord is my shepherd, there is nothing I shall want. Fresh and green are the pastures where he gives me repose. Near restful waters he leads me to revive my drooping spirit. Response: he guides me along the right path. He is true to his name. If I should walk in the valley of darkness, no evil would I fear. You are there with your crook and your staff. With these you give me comfort. Response: you have prepared a banquet for me in the sight of my foes. My head you have anointed with oil. My cup is overflowing. Surely goodness and mercy, kindness shall follow me all the days of my life. In the Lord's own house shall I dwell forever and ever. Those who have died in Christ will be the first to rise, and then those of us who are still alive will be taken up into the clouds, together with them, to meet the Lord in the air. So we shall stay with the Lord forever. With such thoughts as these, you should comfort one another. This is the word of the Lord. Strong is his
Blessed the merciful, they shall have mercy shown them. Blessed the pure in heart, they shall see God. Blessed the peacemakers, they shall be called children of God. Blessed those who are persecuted in the cause of right, theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are you when people abuse you and persecute you and speak all kinds of calumny against you on my account. Rejoice, be glad, for your reward will be great in heaven.
We pray tonight, especially for our loved ones whose 20th anniversary occurs tonight. We remember Declan Arthurs, Seamus Donnelly, Tony Gormley, Anthony Hughes, Eugene Kelly, Patrick Kelly, Jim Lina, Padraig McKierney, and Gerard O'Callaghan. May God rest them all eternal rest. Lord, hear us.
We pray for all their family and friends. May they have consolation from the knowledge that they will one day meet again and be together forever in eternal happiness. Lord, hear us.
We pray especially for all close family members who are at home or sick at hospital at this time. May God give them strength and courage to bear their suffering. Lord, hear us.
We pray for justice and peace in our families, homes and country, and ask God to give us the grace to live together in harmony. Lord, hear us.
will come.